For me and the Lord, we've got an understanding.
We're on a mission from God.
Here we go. A very special edition. Been trying to put this conversation together for quite some time. This is a live show, just so you all know. People in the chat. Is this a premiere? It'll say premiere, man. It'll say premiere if it's really a premiere. Welcome to the casual stream. I have Glenn Lawrence. I have the Iron Disciples with me today. We're going to talk about is the red pill compatible with Christianity? As you know, I've written quite extensively on this topic. Yeah, I'm back in the saddle. I'm back in Reno, Nevada. And yes, there will be another show tomorrow, too. This is just a special edition for the heated debate. You put heated debate in any title, and everybody wants to be a part of it.
The husband is responsible for the emotional well-being of his wife and of his family. You just can't come home and pass out in the lazy boy and say, I made the money for the groceries. I made the car payment. Your most important responsibility starts when you walk in the door of your house, not when you leave the door of your house. You're responsible not just for provision and security. You're responsible for the emotional well-being of your family. Okay? And so I'll do Husband 101. Sometimes she tells me things, and I want to fix it. I learned a long time ago I'm supposed to listen and not fix everything.
Or you could just listen to the inimitable Chris Rock and say, you can never make a woman happy.
Man, that guy's making marriage sound fun.
Yeah, right? I know. Everybody wants to sign up for that, right?
You know, like every time I hear them, like when I hear that stuff, I just want to like shake them, like baby shake them.
I don't know. I'm at the point right now where it's like if I'm listening to a pastor or a sermon, but usually it's like I hate to like pick on Baptists right now, but like if I listen to evangelical, pastors and stuff, I'm not even like waiting for something that's really over the top. I'm waiting for just like little hints of, oh, my wife's always right. You know, that kind of stuff, like those little hints of it right there. And you're just kind of teasing out what that guy's whole attitude is. Anyways, for all of you guys who don't know who the Iron Disciples are, you guys are probably the only, like, I would say, I don't know what to even call you, but like there was a time when I was blogging quite often, more than I do now. And I was a regular, let's just say, for a guy named Dalrock. And Dalrock was, in my opinion, probably the best. He should have been one of the 4 R's or the 3 R's, like Rollo, Roosh, and Royce. Dalrock should have been in on that as well. But Dalrock's forte was sort of doing a come to Jesus blog, in some cases literally, with what we call the red pill community right now, what we call the manosphere. We weren't even calling it the manosphere back then, but it was sort of intersexual dynamics, a little bit of pickup artist. It was sort of what we have come to know as the manosphere, and it's He I think had the most unique take on it now, and he's what I would call the Christo manosphere or the Christo red pill, if there is such a thing. And so it was an attempt for almost like 10 or 12 years of him blogging to sort of talk about what we're going to talk about today. Is the red pill compatible with Christianity? I have done shows on Muslim podcasts where we have asked this exact same question. I have talked about this as well. When I was doing, as you guys already know, I have done 5 books, and the 4th one was called Religion. And I did that one because of exactly the conversation that we're going to have here today, because I had so many guys were saying, well, Rollo, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I am a Mormon, I am, insert the blank. And I don't believe in premarital sex, or I believe the red pill. The red pill has got it down. The reality's right there in my face. You can't. It's unignorable, and it's hard to argue against it. But I'm not about spinning plates. I'm not about dating multiple women. I'm not about premarital sex. Or in some cases, even in like Hindu cultures, it'd be like, well, I'm set for a prearranged marriage, and that's just part of their conviction and their religion. Or, for example, in Muslim cultures, you can have up to 4 wives. And that's something that's a little bit frowned upon in Christianity too. So I
on
wrote
the Old Testament though.
Yeah, under the Old Testament.
Christianity today.
Go for it.
Today, that's what it is. It's frowned upon. But there's a solid argument to say that if it wasn't for the laws in place, that it would still be a practice.
All right, let me introduce everybody here first, real quick. So, Iron Disciples, you guys, why don't you give us just a quick elevator pitch for what it is that you guys do? You guys are probably the only Christian podcast that's in this sort of wheelhouse, I guess, that I really kind of got behind, because I felt like you guys had potential. I wanted to have you on for quite some time. So here we go. If you guys would just like give a very quick pitch as to what it is you guys are doing, why'd you get into this?
Yeah, so appreciate you having us here, Rollo, as well. Like we never set out to even be in this space. So we started actually as we started a men's small group, kind of like a gym bro men's small group, which evolved into us like we should make a podcast and kind of like use that as like an extension of our group. And then that kind of naturally, like I'd already been following, like I found you, Rollo, before this. I had been following a lot of red pill stuff, and I was like, I want to talk about this from a Christian kind of lens. And so like if you look at our podcast, we got a huge variety of stuff, but we do touch some red pill topics, and I think like it's lacking in the Christian world, and a lot of the truths in the data that red pill shows is just kind of just proves the Bible correct, actually. So I think it would be great to see more Christians talking about this topic.
Yeah. And you have a twin, don't you?
Yeah, he's not here today.
He's not here today. I was going to say.
Yeah. Just picture me and duplicate it.
Exactly, duplicated. I just want people to know that you actually have a twin too.
I think probably most people think like when they see our social media content, that's like just one person. It's probably like they think it's the same person. It's both of you and many of them.
It's like Jason Momoa times 2. And let me, just before I get started now, you and your brother, your twin brother, are what's his name?
Johnny.
Okay, so you and Johnny are both, well, because you're obviously identical twins. Are you both married, or is just he married, or are you married, or you guys are both married?
My brother got married November 14th of last year. And I'm new. Well, you could say relatively newly single. I was in a relationship for almost 13 years. September 20th of 2021, we ended up separating amicably, but we're never married. But for all fundamental purposes of the word, like I was pretty much married. I just in that time did not have a high view of marriage, which is something we can talk about today.
I'm sure we'll get into it. Yeah. And Mike, are you married as well?
No, I'm single.
You're single. Okay. Just clarifying things here. And can I get you guys' ages? I don't think I ever asked you this.
Yeah, I'm 29.
You're 29. 34. Okay. And I would presume your brother is also 34.
And he's 1 minute older than me.
Yeah, he's 1 minute old. Okay, he's the older twin. Okay, he came out first. All right. Glenn, can you give a quick introduction? Now, people have seen you already on Access Vegas once before. We had you on with Red Pill Thor, Modern Life John, and Aaron Clary, of all people.
Yeah.
And so they kind of got to know you a little bit then. So just give my audience just a quick intro.
Yeah. So I am Glenn Lawrence. I actually held a degree in religion from Liberty University. I was a youth pastor, and actually, in all actuality, acted as the assistant pastor in a small church. I've done mission trips, ran conventions and stuff like that. I'm now into the entertainment industry. I'm an actor. Couple projects. Actually, I just saw one of the films that I did yesterday. It was pretty cool. So I'm in this space where I left the church out of a divorce, and when I realized that the church kind of just left me there dry, hanging on this whole issue, I was going through that whole process of zeroing out, and thank God I came across your book, and it really helped me out. And from finding this community, I plugged into Paul from Apex Mindset, who helped me with getting over the grief process of the divorce. I was married for 13 years. So yeah. So when I say the red pill saves people probably more than the church does these days, I'm one of them. So.
Oh, well, there you go. Good. All right. Well, everybody
one
knows
for the red pill community.
Yes. I maybe I'd just give a really brief rundown for people who don't know from about 2017. The summer of 2017 until well, I was done with the book in 2020, but I published it in 2021, the beginning of 2021. It was The Rational Male Religion. And I was actually pushed to do that book by Pat Campbell. And Pat, as people know, Pat Campbell was my mentor until he died. Brain tumors and cancer, and like up to his dying breath. Like I think probably the most proud he was when I gave him that book, because he was like just waiting for that to happen, right? And I got to know a much different audience, I think, as a result of doing the His Terrestrial Radio show. It is the Bible Belt, right? Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you watch Tulsa King on I think it's Paramount or something like that with Sylvester Stallone. If you watch that show and you sort of like see the community, but it's really like that. It's the buckle of the Bible Belt. And so when I'm on his show, I'm a cold bucket of truth on that show. So when I'm saying like, sex is the glue that keeps a relationship together, they just, oh my God, I can't believe it. Or if I say, my notch count's about 41, 42, they're like, oh my God, what a man whore you are. Right. I'm like, but I know guys in like triple I don't know where I am, but it was kind of a shock to the system for myself as well as the people who I was talking to at that time. And it sort of pressed upon me the need to write a book that was dedicated to sort of, bringing all religion, not just Christianity, but all religions together to sort of discuss, at the very least, discuss red pill topics that we've been discussing up to that point for almost 20 years, certainly like 18 at that time, and sort of reconcile people's convictions, their religious convictions, with sort of the realities that we see in women's nature and men's nature. And we look at it through a lens of evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, anthropology, sociology, and all the ologies you can think of. So I've been wanting to have this conversation for a while. I did a series of interviews with people of varying religions to do my research for that book. So I was talking to like guys like Abu American and a few other notables who are part of the Islamic community. I talked to them. Rabbi Kaba, my Ask a Jew section, whenever I wanted to know something about the Old Testament or the Pentateuch or the Torah, like if there was something I wanted to know about the Jewish, the Orthodox Jewish community, I was asking him. He still emails me to this day. So I did quite a bit of research. It was sort of a multi-faith effort on my part, but I knew I had to be very, very specific and very precise, because everybody's going to say, and I wanted to point this out right here at the beginning before I cut you loose, Glenn. The biggest problem I always run into with that book, and anytime I have these discussions, is everyone's going to say, well, that's not the real Christianity. That's not the real Islam. That's not the real Judaism. That's not the real Hinduism. That's not the real Sikh. That's not the real, whatever it is. So you get this, what I call the Orthodox paradox. And that was in the introduction of my fourth book. And really what it amounts to is the no true Scotsman logical fallacy, which is only a real Scotsman would do these things, right? So I always argue, you can't argue against God. So if somebody has a very deep, invested conviction in their religion, you will eventually reach a point where it's like, well, they don't do it the right way. The Baptists are going to hell, but the Catholics are going to heaven. The Methodists are going to hell, but the Lutherans are going to heaven, right? It's whatever your belief set is, and you can have discussions up to a point, and then it's like, well, but they're full of shit. Basically that's what it amounts to. So
yeah, I really like the way you did that in the beginning of religion. Mm-hmm. how you frame that type of conversation that occurs, because one person's not coming from a rational, logical perspective. It's very much faith-based. It's based on these things that you cannot prove, and they're coming from a moral high ground, and oftentimes looking down on somebody that's coming from more of like a secular world, where that's just presenting information.
Yeah, exactly. I've always tried. Okay, I've always made the effort, let's just say, to be as objective and as praxeological as possible, to try to keep my own biases out of things. To try to, like, I'm not saying I'm successful at that. I'm just saying that's my point of origin. That's where I start from when I'm talking, especially when it comes to religion, because everybody is very, very. It's a personal thing, right? I mean, if you're invested in your religion, that's part of your life. So it's like for me to like say, what about this, and challenge certain like aspects of your convictions. That's like me saying your mama raised you wrong, right? It's like you're not living your life right, or you're not raising your children right. So it's a very personal thing. That's why people get really, they get their fur up, when even the conversation comes up. But I think particularly now more than ever, with the rise of sort of like the incels and the lonely men and the lost boys and everything else, it's like we have to have this discussion. It has to be had. So because I think it's an integral part to a lot of what's going on right now, especially like with the crisis of masculinity and all that other stuff. Because I started noticing I don't say the infiltration, the assimilation of mainstream religion as far back as like 2005, and it rubbed me the wrong way. But I couldn't really wrap my head around why it rubbed me the wrong way. But now, like after I've written the book, I'm like, okay, now I get it. And then I also want to point out one other thing here too. When people say, "Well, Rollo, you're the rational male. Why are you even having this conversation? Who cares about this flying spaghetti monster in the sky? And who cares? It's all BS. And it's all fantasy and magical thinking and stuff." So I'm sure there's going to be an element of atheists who are going to say, "Well, Rollo, that's all hokum, right?" And again, in the introduction of my book, I said, look, if you are reading this book because you think I'm going to shit on religion, you're going to be disappointed. If you're reading this book because you think I'm going to shit on atheism, you're also going to be disappointed. It's about analysis. It's about understanding. So from that perspective, I wanted to get that sort of the preamble out of the way before we start getting into what Glenn is going to get us into here. So Glenn, why did you want to do this show?
So I wanted to do this show because I was the guy that left the church because I was told that I wasn't a good servant leader. That my wife's affairs were because I wasn't being a good servant leader. And to some degree, I know that we all fall short. We're not all perfect. So I could say, you know what, maybe there's some ownership that I have to take, but I didn't put her on the dick. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not the one that placed her there. She did it herself. And I realized that the accountability factor was all on me. And so that's kind of like what pushed me out of the church, was like there was not this biblical accountability that they preach about, but I realized they only preach that to men. And I noticed a lot of guys also started leaving the church, like that I know, other Christians that I knew from different churches, they would end up no longer attending church. And these guys were also in ministry. So I kind of figured, wondering what was going on. And when I would go visit a church afterwards, I always noticed how feminized it was. The worship was very feminized. I started to notice female pastors stepping up and delivering sermons. And I'm like, wow, these are very, very strong things in the Bible where it tells us not to, especially having a women pastor. And then I noticed the egalitarian concept and belief started coming out. And I was just like, well, wait a minute, this egalitarian thing, that's not biblical either, because there's that removes headship. So I started seeing a lot of guys leave this space and not know where to go. And then they would be told that they're not a real Christian if they're in the red pill, or if they associate themselves with the red pill. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So myself and Mike did a stream about maybe a month ago or 2 months ago. And we were trying to like discuss some of these topics. And I got a comment on there, and I think the guy's in here. I think his name is Mikhail 723. And I think I saw him earlier in the chat. And he wrote me 2 long comments. And I was like, that's when I reached out to you guys. I said, hey, let's discuss this. Let's try to clarify this. One, there's some errors in his understanding of biblical principles, and there's also errors, I think, in his understanding of red pill praxeology. So I think it's good for us to clear the air of what these, differences are, and show how they could overlap, where the principles overlap and where you could cross. Because there's some areas that I could say that maybe you not want to pick up those tools or exercise those tools because of your biblical worldview, but that's fine because it's a praxeology. You don't have to take it or accept it or use it, and you can just be aware of it.
Well, guys, what did you guys like when you guys made the Iron Disciples? When you guys sort of like said, "Hey, let's do a podcast. Let's do something here. Let's expand this beyond just like lifting bros." and these guys are in Florida, by the way. I just want to point that out. And I love you like brothers. We've had conversations like really, I don't know what, like August of last year, I think maybe as far back. But you guys came at me for some stuff, and I'm like, I like these guys. I think they have they're in the right, their heart's in the right place. But like, I want to correct some of the errors. But like, what was it that got you into this space in the first place? Like, what were you trying to do? Were you trying to create like a ministry or something? Or
well, I'll say one thing is that I haven't been to church for a long time. I was raised in churches since my mom met my stepdad. He was a Christian. Before that, was not a really big church person. But played in church bands, was a part of the groups, did all that stuff, and then fell away from it because church just was not. Or this is really what I want to say is I don't go to church, and I don't think the church is a building per se where you have to congregate. I believe it's where two or more gathered. So technically, Mike and I are having church right now. And on Saturday mornings, my brother and I would have like a little group where we'd get together, we'd crack open the Bible, we'd have some coffees, we talk about our lives, and we talk about the Bible, and we'd pray together, and we'd have this really wholesome time together. And we started to have friends over, and it kind of grew from there. But that's the type of church that I go to. I don't go to a church anymore. This is the church that we go to, and I attend it here lately at Mike's place. And I think that's a good thing for a lot of guys to know is like church is happening where you guys are together, two or more guys. It can happen anywhere.
And then as far as the podcast itself, like, so it's kind of funny because before we met, I had just discovered some of the red pill content. I actually discovered it through, it's funny, the rabbit trail of this stuff. I was watching Tim Pool, and he had on Myron and Fresh. Probably the first time he had them on, and then I was like, "Who are these guys?" And I looked up their show, and I was like, "This is very entertaining." So I started watching that. Then naturally, you were on one of the episodes, Rollo, and then that sent me down your rabbit trail. I read The Rational Male and told these guys about it, and so that's kind of how I got into the like understanding of the red pill space. And then what we do itself, we just kind of wanted to have raw thoughts of Christian men out there. We're not setting out to like preach to people, really. We're not setting out to be teachers essentially, but we're just having raw thoughts of Christian men.
And we want to encourage guys to do deep study, kind of like, get into the Bible, read it, and then get into all the other, figure out what's going on there. Like pay it some really good attention, expect a high value out of this scripture right here, and take time to really dive in and study. Because I feel like we live in a world where everything's clipped out. Everyone wants little sound bites and little bits of information, but they don't want to dig deep into anything. And like, as in training, we've been training for years. And as in any discipline that you want to take to a high level, you have to put in the effort consistently and dig deep for yourself, source material out for yourself to find out the answers if you want to lead yourself and choose the right leaders to be under so that you can evolve and grow within whatever discipline that you are choosing to be a part of. So I feel like young men need that orientation, and it's something that we choose to bodybuild. But I believe that these same values or these, we could call them rules, the discipline, the consistency, these are the types of things that are going to get you far in whatever endeavor that you choose in life. And I think young men need more of that. They need more of that in this world, in this life, in their own lives. They need the willpower. They need the strength. They need the freaking nuts to go after what they want to go after. Whether it's like you were saying, Rollo, I was listening to one of your other podcasts where there's a few guys on there. And we was talking about guys taking a girl on a date. Like, and I could not wrap my brain around this. I was looking at my brother in the truck. We were driving over to Tampa. And you're talking to this kid, and it's like he doesn't know when he asks a girl out to go on a date that he should know where they are going to go. Like that, it
Have a
seems
plan.
so asinine and
They have to say
normal and apparent to me. But obviously, we're dealing with a generation where they don't know the fundamentals of like just normal being a man's shit. Like, you're gonna ask a chick on a date, know the restaurant you're gonna go to, know where you're gonna go after that. Have a plan, bro. What do you think's gonna happen here?
Yeah, exactly.
Have a freaking plan. But that apparently is what's going on. So I think a lot of these kids are living in kind of like a well, I don't know, just not, they don't have deep roots, and they don't know how to believe in themselves properly.
To piggyback off of what Glenn was saying too, I think the church today, and I'm sure we'll get into this, is very feminized. And I think actually, after reading the religion book, Rollo, you can't like unsee it now when you have that lens on looking at different churches. And that's the big thing. Yeah, that's the big thing.
Earl, and I think Allie might even be in the chat right now. We're like, Roll Tomasi ruined church for me.
I know it does. It kind of does. But I think it also is, I mean, it's a good thing to realize too, because I grew up in the church, and I kind of started taking my faith seriously when I started studying like apologetics late high school. But you're completely naive to all this stuff when you're just growing up in it. So whether same with the pastors, like you see all these feminized pastors. Well, they grew up in it. Like, what, they don't know any different. They don't know what it's the masculine version of it could be. So that and we see that with men. We meet so many Christian men who are not going to church because it's just not for them. But they have the Christian values, and they have the faith. And so we find that with our group, we have a lot of men we meet at the gym. They're Christian. They consider our group their church. And we want to encourage that more. Like, if you're not going to like put the time, like, you need community in this life.
Yeah,
and
you think about the first disciples. They didn't have a building they were going to. They were walking around the desert, going to Damascus, to Capernaum. They're just hanging out, living, surviving, doing things together, living life together. This idea of like a church with this whole crappy band that plays boring ass music, and you have to suffer through that.
Hey, I was part of that crappy band. Okay,
I was too. And I speak from a place of understanding. And I was playing double bass back there, and it's like, you guys are gonna have some metal today. That's the idea, is that you're not allowed to do those types.
It pots you down.
yeah, they're always like cranking me down.
I've noticed that. So that needs to be discussed.
It does, and further, but
and you're like, all I hear is piano and bass.
Oh no, that's why you just keep you plug into your own amp.
I can totally see why no one wants to be a part of it. It's boring. It's flaccid. It's got no mass. It's not exciting. Men need to be fighting wars. They need to be engaged, and it's not engaging for a man to go to church. In fact, I feel testosterone leaving my body every time I go to church.
and then that, like, I've had this conversation many times with kind of like people in the church community, and it's usually like, well, go there and change it. Like, go be the change in that church. And it's like, well, that's like, I think you have to almost start over. You can't go into a established, especially these like non-denominational mega churches, and go flip it upside down. Like, you gotta.
It's like the car is broken down. It's in the junkyard. It's about to get crushed. Let's go build a new one. Like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
I always, I mean, you probably read this in the book as well, is like, as we've become a globalized society, really, and we have commercialized everything. When we talk about like, intersexual dynamics, we refer to it in the terms of like asexual marketplace, right? Some people would like say, oh, it's a marriage marketplace, it's a sexual market. Okay, whatever. It's still an economy is what it is. And so what we've done is we have industrialized and commodified every aspect of our life, if you think about it. And religion was actually probably one of the first ones that got commodified. And so I said this on a couple of occasions on some shows, but it's features pretty heavily in religion. And it's the fact that we have such a reliance on you've got to be relevant in terms of being commercially viable as a church. And where do you draw the line between being a commercial enterprise, or I refer to as franchises, because that's really what Christianity has become. It's a series of franchises. Instead of Burger King and McDonald's, it's, whatever, I mean, gosh, you guys live in Florida. You can't go past a strip mall without there being a church and some.
They all feel the same too. Like,
go to a high school auditorium on any Sunday. There's probably a worship service going on in Florida, right? Because it's a seed church. And so how do you stand out from all the crowd? How do you like make your taco stand better than Joe's taco stand kind of thing? Because you're selling the same tacos, right?
Mhm.
And so it becomes a commercial enterprise. And I pointed out in that book also that because of the fact that we've updated to the point where you've got to have a social media presence, you've got to have a blog, you've got to have a Substack, you've got to have a YouTube channel, you've got to broadcast live, you got to pay your freaking musicians. Thank you very much. You've got to have, there's a lot of moving parts for what really amounts to an enterprise, to a franchise now. And how does that affect, how does that water down an inspired message, right? I mean, you can go
100%.
online. I was just having, maybe you guys, I don't know if you've heard about this, but I was just having a conversation just yesterday about how ChatGPT and OpenAI will be responsible for creating sermons on the fly.
I wouldn't be surprised if pastors are not already using them.
Yeah. So I wanted to toss that out to you guys first. Is how much of this commercialization do you think is responsible for men leaving the church? I think more so because we live in a gynocentric social order right now. Women have always been more religious than guys. I know a lot of people are going to fight me on that, but I can show you the stats and I can show you the psychological studies that show that women prioritize emotion before reason, and men. It's not to say that men aren't emotional. They can. It's just that they have to get past the reason part before they get to the emotional part. That's why there are more atheist men than there are atheist women, right? Because it's that rationality and that reason, whereas they can't hear the quote unquote still small voice, right? And they can't, it's the emotional side where we process emotion after we process reason, whereas women process emotion and then they process reason. So, and I'm not saying one's better than the other or anything. I'm just saying that's just the way the machine is built. But women, especially today, tend to be more religious than men. And if that's the case, then appealing to women puts more asses in the seats when you're trying to have a commercial enterprise that is a church now. So one of the arguments that I made in the fourth book was that there's nothing left for men in the church right now, because we've gotten to the point where we've commercialized it so much that that's what sells. Whatever works for women, how we can take a secular thing that appeals to women, put the Jesus fish logo on it, and get more asses in the seats.
Well, that's the problem, Rollo. You just nailed it on the head. People
Exactly.
are trying to make Christianity and religion cool. It's not supposed to be cool. It's not to be something that's it's not an entertainment deal. We're not sitting here trying to get people in the seats to make cash. It shouldn't be that way. This is the choice that you make to live a better life and to affect those around you in a positive manner, and to hopefully leave a legacy that's positive in life. It's not about making the money, but like you said, the men are more rational, the women are more emotionally based. And what we've done is we've taken something magical and we've destroyed it, and we've turned it, we've made it innocuous to the body, the mind, and the spirit. And the women are good on this because they can just sit there and talk and do their little chicken hen thing together endlessly. And it's they're happy to do that. But then the guys, they have no nuts because they're raised this way, and that they don't know, you need to start doing things and maybe go your own way. Maybe not fight this battle, but you got to start just living a little bit and making this work, because you can't just blame it on them. No. Then you're putting the ball back in their court. Take that ball, put a slam dunk down yourself, dude.
Well, here's the point. I want to bring up something really important. You said religious and the religion. Okay. The Bible is not about, God is not about religion. He actually opposes religion. He wanted a relationship with his people. That's been the story the whole time. When Moses was up there getting the 10 Commandments, God said, bring my people up here. And the people are like, no, go up there and talk for us. So the people wanted the religion. God wanted a relationship. So the reason why these churches work so well for women, because it works in this religious aspect, which is all about this, how it makes me feel. I mean, that's why you had Bethel Music going around, doing what they were doing. And then come to find out, they're doing some satanic stuff up in there in Bethel and Redding. All right. And then now that got exposed. And then the Hillsongs, everything that was female led or female, focused, even the music, the music in church was never about it was kind of gross. It kind of got to the point where it was are we singing love songs to God? I want you to be what to me? I thought it kind of felt a little R. Kelly-ish at times when I'm, trying to sing to Jesus. And I was like, no, what happened to those masculine songs of God, of his glory and of his power? And No, it's like I'm sitting here quietly singing to you, Jesus. Like, no, like, you know, it changed because it was geared to one audience. But here's the thing, it was geared to the audience that it wasn't even preaching to. That's the sad thing. Like, if you're going to be preaching to the audience that you're you know, that you have dependent upon your tithes and offerings, then preach to them. But you had them coming, but you're preaching to the other side of the audience and not even addressing the audience that you are catering to. And that was a sad thing.
I think it also, being that it's kind of evolved into a business in almost every sense, it, like, there's a good book, I think, if you're interested in this topic, is by Francis Chan, called Letters to the Church. A bunch of us read it. Book. And he talks about, he built a big mega church, and he like removed himself from it because he kind of realized this is not, I don't think, what God intends church to be. And like, I think his quote on saying the church, like he made, these mega churches are designed to fill seats rather than create disciples, I think really reigns true to that. And you see, like, these churches, they run budgets usually to the edge. And so, like, if they preach a sermon that might scare away 10% of their audience because it's not politically correct, like, what's that going to do to the tithe? And so they got all these incentive structures that are almost backwards for them to speak the truth in the rawest form.
Yeah, look at John the Baptist. He was out there in, you know, skins, eating honey and locusts. I mean, it's really hard to corner that guy. You know, you can't get him with food. You can't get him with sex. You can't get him, like, how are you going to blackmail this dude? You know, he's just going to speak truth. And the church has got its nuts just chopped right off.
Yeah, I mean, the sermons now just make you feel good about yourself. But if the pastor is not preaching a message that you don't feel some form of, you know, conviction, okay, then, you know, it doesn't have to be every sermon because that's depressing. But I mean, like, if you don't feel like, oh man, I need to step up, I'm falling short, you know, and you don't get that urge to, you know, to dive deeper into your walk, and you're left feeling all fluffy and butterflies, then you're going to the wrong church. You know, they're about the emotionalism. They want you to feel good when you leave. So that means you leave a nice tithe when you leave. Hey, you put an extra 10% on that check when you walk out, so the pastor could get his Rolls Royce. You know, it's sad because that's the way that it is. That's how it's geared. Before, it used to be like, you know, conviction. They would do the good messages and the feel good stuff, but they also give you that message that would, you know, put you in the fire. And if you're gold, how you purify gold, you put it in fire. You know, and there's none of that going on anymore.
Yeah, there's not. And I think one of the reasons for that is because, well, I mean, there's a qualifiable difference between a Mother's Day sermon and the Father's Day sermon. Okay.
Yep.
Mother's Day is you can do no wrong. Now, I'm going to quote Dalrock here because this has been going on for at least 2 decades now. Women are sinless. Essentially, we don't want to find any way to rebuke them. We don't want to have any, there's no shame. It's all about forgiveness from the female side. For men, you ain't living up. It's all the burden of performance.
Do better, dads.
Responsibility without authority is what it ends up being. So it's like you have just the guy that we just played just a second ago. You have a responsibility. So once your workday is over and you busted your ass for like, God knows how, 8-10 hours, you got to come home, and now your responsibility is to make this bitch happy, according to, you know, Chris Rock, right?
Happy wife, happy life.
Happy wife, happy life. And you got to keep the kids on point. You got to do it. You have so much more going on for you. And like you guys were saying, we're kind of like joking a little bit about it. It's like, yeah, that doesn't sound like a really good, you know, brochure for getting married right now. And so what people will say is like, well, Rollo, that just means that you want to be this irresponsible, you know, idiot who wants to go romp around and just have sex with random women. It's like, no, that doesn't. I mean, you can go both extremes. Is it okay to have actually have some authority as the man to begin with? Because I don't hear those sermons. I hear this, like the one that we saw in the beginning here, the clip. I find that's usually in some way, like it can be just sort of passive aggressive, or it can be like overt. Usually it's overt right around the Valentine's Day sermon, or the Mother's Day sermon, or the Father's Day sermon. And so there's this kind of like, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but when I'm at an evangelical church or Protestant church or whatever, whenever it's Valentine's Day, the pastor feels like he's got to talk about love, and so I got to drag out Corinthians, and you got to go up there. And I've noticed this trend where the pastors have to bring their wives up on the stage.
They all say she's the hottest woman in this place.
My bride. She's my bride. You got married like 30 years ago, and she's my bride. You know, I'm because that's like what it is it's sort of this pandering to, you're still as hot as you used to be, baby. I still love you, blah. Please, you know, qualify me, validate me. But it's about having that woman's as sort of an overseer in the locker room. And the locker room in this case happens to be the church. So on a Valentine's Day, or you know, right around that time when love is the quote unquote, you know, theme of the month, that's when we got to bring the little lady up on there to say, he's right, fellas, right, ladies, he's right. You know, like there has to be some sort of like third party endorsement from the pastor's wife for the message that the guy's going to say. It's almost like he has to have that there as like a chaperone, you know, for that kind of stuff. But when it's the Father's Day sermon, it's usually, you guys ain't living up. There's something, you're addicted to porn. You guys you're not living up to responsibilities. And if mama ain't happy, God ain't happy. And I've got a little graph that I'm going to show you. I want you guys to respond to that. And I know Glenn has some other stuff for you, but I'm going to show you how it used to be and how it is now. So it comes in the form of an umbrella. I'm going to go dig it up real quick, but go ahead and take it away, Glenn, real quick. I think you had another thing.
It's funny that you mentioned like the whole Father's Day thing, because I have something just for that. Like I've been working on this for a while, and I think originally, Rollo, I think we were trying to like do something in November, I think it was, when we were talking about this. And so when I looked into this, like, because I knew that there was something going on, and I first thought it was me, but then when I started diving deeper into the scripture, I noticed it was an issue with walking through the scripture that was not being practiced. And I'm trying to, where is it at? Where's my drive? It's not letting me get to my drive. Okay, hold on one second. So, you know, when we Mike did this video, and when I got the comment from I think Mikhail, I said this is the perfect time to try to get a collaboration on this, because I hear what Ruslan's saying, I hear what Hafiz is saying, and you know, they just, there's a lot of misunderstanding, and I even challenge their even biblical knowledge to a degree, because you know there's a gap here. They're either misinterpreting what the red pill is being said, or they're only catching the triggering stuff, you know, the TLDR, or they're not understanding where the Bible and the praxeology cross. So I want to read like what Mikhail said to me, and then, you know, because it kind of gives it a preference of what we're going to be talking about. So he said, if you're a Christian, you believe that premarital sex is a sin and that should never be done. Divorce is a sin, that you should never do it no matter what, besides infidelity. Sexual desiring a female is sinful. Matthew 5:28, Job 31. Objective morality exists, and it's only found in the Bible. Not all red pill guys believe this in the same thing, but if you're red pill, you most likely believe that the best way for men to be successful with women is to gain experience with them and date them and sleep, have premarital sex with lots of them. Divorce, breakup, or even infidelity is required if your wife no longer respects you anymore, no longer has genuine desire for you, or is no longer giving you sex. Lustful and sexual desire is a survival instinct or an urge to reproduce with fertile women and isn't inherently bad, according to the red pill. Humans are innately amoral and do not live by any objective morality, nor should they, according to some red pill guys. A lot more examples, and then he comes back with, I personally don't agree with Ruslan or Hafiz on any of their talking points, although I kind of do agree that if you're Christian, but you live like a red pill guy, especially on the practices of premarital sex, you're most likely lukewarm for that. RP guys are strong believers in evolutionary psychology, biology, nature over nurture. Okay, then he lists another. He wrote a lot. You wrote a lot. Okay, I appreciate it, Mikhail. His next set of things, he goes, according to Christianity, it's evil and sinful to be violent and aggressive, yet God biologically created us that way. Jealousy, sexual jealousy, is evil and sinful in Christianity, yet God created us that way. Rollo Tomasi even urges that jealousy is mate guarding survival instincts deeply rooted in our biological behavior, which I agree with. If this is true, then God created us that way, yet he condemned us for it. Men are biologically created to reproduce with many females, to be promiscuous. Men are also created to practice premarital sex. We already went through that. God condemned it. Okay, cool. The beneficial and necessary to leave a marital or non-marital relationship when a woman isn't treating you right, or if the relationship isn't generally in benefiting you, yet God condemns it and commands you to be with one woman, and that you must stay with that woman no matter what, unless she commits adultery. I could bring up many more examples, so forth. Okay. So that's what we're going to be kind of going over. There's a lot of misunderstanding there. And, I think it's important, Rollo, like kind of first understand, like, can we correct, and Mike and, I forgot, not John. You're not John.
Joe.
We should correct some of these like biblical misunderstandings here and the red pill praxeology first, because I think we got to unclear that mess up a little bit before we could get any further. So I mean,
there's a lot of straw manning I see on, and that's one of the reasons why I like you guys, Iron Disciples, Mike. The reason I like you guys is because like you're willing to like at least have the conversation. Because maybe it's because you're not quite the brand that these like Ruslan or Hafiz, the rest of these guys have been talking about like recently, just now, because their livelihood depends on that message, and they can't coexist with the red pill, because the red pill conflicts with the message that they're trying to put out there. Whereas I can talk to you guys. Like when you guys came at me and we're saying like, oh, Rollo says this, Rollo's got one book. I'm like, no, dude, I got 5. Like that, like when we first met, that was the first thing I did was I had to sort of like correct you and say like, look, I like where you guys are going with this, but I do have 5 books, not just the one. And then, maybe you want to talk about particular individual topics because there's a lot of different things there, but it's like correcting all of sort of the misconceptions, I think, is probably the first and maybe the hardest part of this, because you guys don't have a dog in the fight maybe yet, but as far as and I mean that in the sense of like your livelihood isn't dependent upon your YouTube and your podcast and your whatever organization of mighty men or something, and I think that a lot of the misconceptions is deliberate, quite honestly. A lot of the straw manning is deliberate. And I think that's kind of a shame because it prevents us from having the conversation like we're having right now. I want to have this conversation. It's just I can't do it because there's like this big wall of money or this big wall of sort of like deliberate ignorance that exists because they simply don't want to have that conversation. Hell, you can't even say my name half the time. But I wanted to, like, maybe we could start with this. Do you guys see what we're seeing as far as like what's going on in the church? Because I will, and by the way, this is not just Christianity. I'll say this about Islam as well, is feminism and gynocentrism has assimilated mainstream religions. And of course, everybody says, yeah, all of those religions, but not mine, right? I get it. Okay, thanks. But do you guys see something similar to that? Do you see a breakdown or a, let's say I think a debasement is that's what Dalrock would have used, the debasement of the faith itself. And hear me out. I look at it this way. There's the core faith. Okay. Then there's the doctrine. Doctrine is the way we exercise a faith. Okay. So like the different franchise, Catholicism, like it has the rituals that exercise a faith in a different way than like Protestants or Baptists, whatever. They got their own way of doing some like handling snakes or whatever. Like that's doctrine, right? But like the doctrine right now is, I brought this in the book, is that because they're trying to make their churches the most successful enterprises that they can, it is in their best interests to take secular things and make them what I call Christian kosher.
Dip them in holy water.
Yeah, well, you put the Jesus fish logo on it, and then suddenly it's good because we're just gonna. It's like Christian heavy metal, right? Like everybody hated Slayer and Iron Maiden and Dio back in the day, but they loved Stryper, and they loved the Christianized heavy metal kind of thing. It's metal, but it's just like we've sort of sanitized it. And it's not necessarily the music so much as it's the lyrics. I get that. But it's like we got to take something from the world and the secular world, and we've got to find a way to make it hip and cool for the Christian market. And I'm sure you guys have seen this. It's not just music, right? I mean, there's like brands of clothing. There's brands of, hell, even just like water bottles, stuff like that. And I think just a little bit that those are like side examples of what I'm talking about when I say that feminism has infiltrated and assimilated mainstream religions, and not just Christianity. But because if you can take elements of feminism and you can make them Christian kosher, and then you can put them into the doctrine of that, the practices of that church, and say, this is the way we do it here, then little by little, it gets the faith gets etched away generation by generation. And that's really what I was trying to raise the alarm bells about with the fourth book.
Right, Rollo, if I could, you covered a lot of great ground on this one. And number one, with the denominations, there's so many different denominations. We're all reading the same Bible. Everyone comes up with a different conclusion. We call that doctrine. This is the way you should believe. These are the rules as according to how I see them. And then we have all these different faiths that are all coming from the Bible itself. So there's a contention within Christianity itself, within what's right and what's wrong. And people love rules. And it just reminds me of this old verse. I don't want sacrifice. I want a contrite heart, or is that pretty much what it is? It's the Old Testament. And I remember, it makes me think about Paul, like when he's going to Ephesians, or when he's going to Corinthians, when he's going to the Galatians, when he's going to the Greeks. And he's like, I became like these people so I could love them, so I could understand them, so I could to understand their lives, what they lived. How could Jesus, how could my message, how could the gospel impact them in a positive way, not going and cramming things down their throat? He talks about, and this is what I mean, people aren't cracking open their Bibles and they're not reading it, because if you read about what Paul talks about sacrifices, and they have a big problem, okay, you can't eat food that's been sacrificed to an idol. That is blasphemy, right? Or when they're talking about the Jews, he's like, there's chapters on people, their dicks getting chopped. Like, okay, this is a big deal for you, because you need it. This is really important for you, but it's not that important for the gospel. It's not going to get you saved or unsaved. Heavy metal, the type of music you listen to, is that going to send you to hell? No, it's a style of music. There's all kinds of ways you can praise God. He says with shouts, with you could do David danced naked for the love of God in front of his entire everybody. God knows what his wife was thinking, what he probably didn't give a shit, because it was between him and God at that point in time, and that's what mattered. So the way that Christians conflate things with their rules, they love order, they like systems, they like rituals, but you forget what's going on because you're not reading the Bible. If you see what Paul went through and how he was trying to, eat the food. It was given to an idol, right? It's okay if you eat this. Anything that you eat that was blessed in his name is good for you. However, if you're going to eat this and you're going to cause all your brothers to stumble and go off the deep end, then maybe not, maybe try something else. And that's the wisdom that needs to be utilized within Christianity right now, because like I said, people just like the rules. They like the doctrine someone else created because it sounds good, and they're not doing the work for themselves.
And I think the kosher side, like making, let's say, the music, I think it's fine that it adapts to the culture it's in. It's just, are they completely changing morals based on culture? Like we see with just
Right.
the LGBT movements and stuff, like Christians just bending the knee to that. So are they conceding essentially core things within their own doctrine to mesh with culture? Like that's an absolute no-go.
Yeah,
are they changing their music style? Okay, that's
Yeah, well, that's always been the way it's been. Like if you go and you look at like back in the 1920s, when there were I think it was the Salvation Army. They would take drinking songs, bar songs, and they would put like Christian lyrics to them. And then that was what got people into the churches, because they already knew the songs from the bars that they were the Prohibition era, right? They're trying to get them into the church. They already knew the songs because they were singing them and drinking at the same time. So they knew the melody and the rhymes and stuff, but they just changed up the lyrics for it at that time. That's really a lot of this the old Salvation Army used to do that. They would take bar songs and turn them into like hymns.
To answer your question though, further on this like feminism, and I mean, yes, totally see the same. I think what you're seeing definitely with what you've written in the book, 100%. And I think one thing I was talking with a buddy about the other day is it was actually in response. We were talking about one of Andrew Tate's tweets. He tweeted something about, he's basically implying the West and Christian values must not be true because, like, look at the results versus, he's probably referring to how great this of society Dubai is or something, and the Muslim values there. And it made me think, like, is feminism and its, like, unfortunate spread like a cancer almost inevitable as societies grow in wealth? And I think we're seeing it now from what I've heard in India. Feminism is starting to take off there. And I'm sure we're going to see it in more of the third world as they gain in wealth. And I think, like, is the only way to stop that from invading the church religion, literally what Islam is, which in many of the countries, it's like the state runs it, and it's like at the state level, as far as control. So it's like, is it almost an inevitable? Is this a human, like, you hear about the fall of Rome, this human cycle of things, like, as wealth increases, does this kind of naturally just continue to, will this happen again and
Rob
again?
Henderson has done, soon to be Dr. Rob Henderson has done a lot of work. I think his doctoral thesis is on luxury beliefs.
Yeah.
And feminism is a luxury belief. Okay?
Yeah, pretty much.
Gynocentrism is the sort of outcome, or I would say the inevitable, like, sort of logical product of feminism on a grander scale, I think. So it's like it's big sister is watching you. And so what he argues, and by the way, feminism is not the only luxury belief. There's lots of others. But as a whole, a society can entertain feminism as long as it maintains a certain GDP, right? As long as there's a certain money in that particular society, then they can sort of hold these ideals. The problem is, and I've heard Dr. Jordan Peterson talk about this, because he buys into the horse shit that is like, oh, well, when we put more women into the workforce, then the GDP rises. Like, yeah, and the fertility rate drops below replacement, Jordan. That's no good for society. We don't.
Wages remain stagnant.
They fixate on women are wonderful. Women are beneficial. They're better leaders. They're this, they're that, whatever. It's like, yeah, well, because men aren't manning up to get into those positions anymore. So yeah, what's the logical conclusion? Well, we got more women in, so it must be success. Yeah, until you start looking at men not participating in the workforce, which I've done a lot of sort of talks and research with Aaron Clary. But like when you look at GDP versus like fertility rates, it's like, yeah, the more women get into the workforce, the lower the fertility rates go. So where do we say, ladies, you can only be in the workforce for so long because you're the incubators of the next generation. And so we can only have X amount. We have to have like a tolerance level of quotas for women to be in the workforce.
Can you imagine having that conversation in politics?
Yeah. You're never gonna sell that in a country that is a first world country that's making, that has a very high GDP, because it's a luxury belief when we can say that, well, we need empowered women. No, we need moms. we need women.
When you say moms, like, you're really saying is we need families, well balanced, with a father and a mother at home. And that is something that has been downgraded. And what they have been doing lately is they've been glamorizing the single mother. They've been glamorizing dual lifestyles. They've made the family out to be something that is like highly stressful and going to basically take every bit of pleasure out of your life. Which, I mean, I've seen guys like this. I have seen guys that are in their 60s and their 70s that are playboys. They're playing the same game that they were playing when they were 20, 30, 40 years old. And I can see in their eyes. I've asked them, like, do you miss out on having a family? And they're like, you know what? They look at me and I can see this loneliness, this little bit of an abyss and this darkness in their head, because they know their golden years are gone. They're going to get older. They're not going to have anything to share with. And what a lot of young guys don't see and they're not paying attention to, and a lot of women do not pay attention to, is how, for instance, this country. Who made this country? What kind of guys were they that made this country a reality, which was absolutely a pipe dream to everybody else? That you're freaking nuts if you think you're going to start this thing off. Okay. What kind of men did that? Like, go back down to the Dionysian period and the Apollonian period, or the Renaissance. Like, what kind of human beings spurred on these historical moments that pushed our human species ahead in a positive manner. And you will see, like you pointed out in your book, these were families. They had families together. They had fathers and mothers, and they were able to pioneer new ground because they had that stability, and they were able to have some ground that they could dig their feet into. Otherwise, we get a generation that's raised by YouTube and Google and everything else but a mom and dad and the education. So these are just a bunch of minnows swimming around the ocean with the waves crashing down, and they don't know where they're going or what they're doing. So it's no wonder that there's no men with direction, because they don't know what that is. They never been showed what that is. They don't care. It's not glamorized.
My only critique of that, I understand what you're saying, and I get it. And for the time, we needed that, like the greatest generation. We needed people to go storm the beaches of Normandy. We did. Okay, those kids don't exist today, and the reason they don't exist today is because we're 5 generations away from that right now. At least 5 generations away from that. And so people want to make these comparisons of guys, sort of getting out of the landing craft and getting shot, up on, on Omaha Beach, right? But the fact is that those challenges don't exist for these kids today. That's why we have the generation that we do. Will we ever have somebody who's going to man up and take charge of the situation? That's the problem I think that we're facing right now, is because we still have those survival situations, and we're going to get caught with our pants down at some point, and we're going to have men who know what the hell they're doing. And those guys are few and far between. The reason I say that is because every time I get on one of these shows with all these girls on there, and they want the high value guy, and they feel like they're entitled to the guy who is the highest of the highest, right? Again, another luxury belief. She's morbidly obese, but she's entitled to the guy who is, makes a 6-figure income, has a 6-pack abs, and the 666, right, and has a chiseled jawline and everything else, and only that guy's going to do. Well, of course you're going to have a low fertility rate when that's the entitlement right now. But what they're saying is they're entitled to the guy who would go storm Omaha Beach if there was a need for him to go and do that. The problem is those guys are so few and far between right now that I don't think we realize that if we get into a bad situation where we need those guys to step up, there's not that many of them anymore, because as the women are finding out, they have to share those guys right now, because there's not enough of them. Yeah, there's the high value guys are gone. Those are the guys
it's like the Oedipal mother thing, like you were saying. Things are, and I think Glenn was also saying this and elaborating to this point, that things are very easy nowadays. The quality of life is very high. So you can get along playing your video games and sucking down Capri Sun until you're 20 years old and be a fat pile of shit and be okay doing that. Whereas back in 1920, you were a man at 14 years old, because that's what it was. You started working when you were young after school. You did your homework and you went to work, and then you went to bed and you made your own meals and you helped out with the family, your younger brother, your younger sister, whatever it may be. You had responsibilities heaped on you from a young age as soon as you could possibly do that. And Jordan Peterson says something that's very good and I love. He said, don't deprive your kids of deprivation. You're just going to mess them up. They're too afraid to put some pain and suffering on a boy. And the mother just raises him until he's never going to become a man. We got a bunch of man children, like you say, the lost boy
failure to launch
going on.
Yep.
Because the man doesn't get it. Put down ass whoopings any day. I got my ass beat by my father all the time, and I deserve
you too.
let me point this out though. Like, I want to point this out, like, because everybody's like, well, where's feminism? Like, does the Bible ever talk about feminism? Is it something? And personally, I believe it does. And Rollo, I'm gonna share a page real quick. Share screen. Which one I want to share? Oh, where it is. It is here we go. So right here, this is in Genesis. Now, this is after Adam and Eve sinned. They ate the apple, and God is like, letting them know what they're going to be doing. Now, he just told Adam he's going to have to be working the soil, tilling the land, to survive. And he turns to Eve and he says to the woman, I will sharpen your pains through pregnancy, and in your pains you will give birth. Your desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you. Before this moment, man and woman were in harmony. There was peace. There was not this, nitpicking, fighting, there was this hierarchy order. This was the original structure of what relationships was supposed to be about. Now, after sin has fallen in the earth, okay, and we're all sinful. Now you have this harmony destroyed. There's now going to be this constant power struggle or everyday shit tests, in that sense. Like, it's like now women are going to constantly shit test men, or they're going to have this inclination to desire to control them or to control over them. This power struggle is now going to be there. And people think about it as, oh, this is just within relationships. Let's take it out of the relationship and just put it in between a male and female interaction, intersexual dynamics. There we go. From basic instinct, you have now women wanting to rule over the men because, one, they're not in the position physically to, but they have to find a way to do it. So their desire is always going to be to rule over them innately for their own security reasons, because they know that this monster, this big guy that benches 345 pounds, is going to crush them if she does something that he doesn't like. So there's always going to be this desire to do it. Now, that's where I think feminism came from. Now I could be wrong, but it just seems too easy to see the dots there, And
let me just because this kind of dovetails into something I wanted to get into here. So we're at the top of the hour here, so I want to throw these out there. These are some diagrams, or these are some like illustrations that I did not use. I feel like I should have now. I did not use them in my book Religion, but I want you guys to see these, and I think this illustrates the point that what Glenn's getting at, and really kind of a bigger point right now. This is an illustration of how things used to be under the old school biblical traditional family structure. There was Christ and God, then there was the husband. Now the husband's responsibility, the patriarchy's responsibility, was to protect the family, to lead the family, and to provide for the family. I think we can all sort of agree about that. Mm-hmm. The wife underneath that, of course, was for comfort, teaching, and nurturement. Okay. And then below that was the children, love parents, obey parents. And then below that is puppy dogs. Okay. So the old school way of doing things, the husband was the head of the house. And this is really sort of like relates back to what Glenn is talking about here from a biblical traditional sense. I got to, first of all, would you agree to this? And then second of all, this is the new way of doing it. So above everything else is Christ once again, but it's like whatever we want to make Christ or whatever we want to make God. That's why it's in quotations right there. And then underneath God and Christ is gynocentrism, teaching, and the Duluth model of feminism. Okay. Then the next is the wife. Okay. And it is her responsibility to protect the family, to comfort, to lead the family, to nurture, and to provide for the family. So all of those things that used to be the purview of the husband are now under the wife, because the wife is making more money, or that she is empowered, and she is actually taken. It's no longer a sort of I hate to even use the term submission anymore, because women lose their friggin' minds when you say that. But like the deference of authority, I think is a better way to talk about that. When you talk about biblical submission, and women their eyes glaze over. But if you say, do you defer authority to your husband? And man, you have a much different conversation. Then below the wife, of course, is the children, to love the mother, to shield the mother from accountability, and to obey the mother. And then below that is the husband, who assumes all responsibility, and he has to generate resources as a result of that. In the new world biblical order, this is the umbrella versus the old school umbrella, which is right here. Now, after you guys have seen this, I'll bring these back up here in just a second. But with that in mind, I want to read you an exchange I had with my good friend Aubrey Huff. Okay, Aubrey Huff is the first baseman for the San Francisco Giants, who has 2 World Series rings to his name, and we will probably have him on Access Vegas in the very near future, probably within the month.
When he becomes a Dodger, I'll be a fan.
He's not. He's retired. Thank you. The church today no longer represents real men. It's been feminized. If you're a Christian like me, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. And this is where I want to go with this. I know many good Christian men who have left in recent years. Now, he's responding to something that this is a quote from my book. If mama ain't happy, God ain't happy. That goes back to the new way we do things. So if the husband's responsibility is to make the wife happy wife, happy life. Because the wife is the next step in the chain of command up to God. And so therefore, if you're not making your wife happy, you're not making the woman happy, Therefore, God must not be happy with you as the man. And I think it's a very dangerous position for us to be in. Now, let me finish the rest of this here. So he's responding to this. He says, why so many men have left the church? The effeminate music, the weak, frail, nerdy pastors that reek of desperation. The modern church and its congregation no longer represent strong, godly men who lead. It's a gathering of broken, divorced men and miserable married men with fake smiles who've been taught to sacrifice everything to make the wife happy. If mama ain't happy, God ain't happy. Kids don't respect him. Society uses him, and all the while he wonders why God isn't blessing him, because he's been brainwashed by a beta male preachers posing as men to get a bigger offering at the donation basket from the women that have been proven to donate more, to tithe more to the church. Today's church no longer belongs to God. It's been infiltrated by Satan. I choose my walk with God outside the walls, and I've never been more awake to the corruption. This is that one stand. That's, by the way, that's just this last month, or like a week ago, I think, because I held on to this. This is something I've been talking about this since the Dalrock days. This is not new, and so people are sort of coming to this, and they're like, we're understanding that, it's not about those red pill PUAs being right or wrong. It's about this. It's unignorable right now. Even the guys who've been in the church for a very long time are looking around. They're going, where are all the dudes? Like, that's why you guys do what you do. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? I mean, you go and you just said when we started this office, like, you have church right here. You have church in the gym, the church, the church of holy gains, and so what I think is happening right now is I see a lot of guys who are part of the church and they sincerely believe. That's why I like you guys above everybody else who I've seen, because it seems to me everybody's sort of a brand and you guys aren't quite a brand yet. And you have a degree of sincerity in all of this. That's why I have you on. But did you guys start this because you saw like all these guys, like, where the hell did all the dudes go?
It was instinctual. It was just instinctual.
I see guys like Pastor Doug Wilson and some of these other guys who, by the way, came at Dalrock way back in the day, and now they're having the same conversations, and they're essentially a different person than they were when they were attacking Dalrock, because they see that it's profitable to get on the men need to be more responsible train, which I see going on in traditional like TradCon, like Ben Shapiro and then the rest of these guys who want to be quote unquote traditionalists. And really, all they're doing is aping and mouthing the same messages that the woke and the feminists have been doing for a long time. You need to take more responsibility. And it comes back to this model of Christianity right here. Generate resources and assume all responsibility. You don't have any authority, but you have responsibility to generate resources, and you have to assume responsibility for anything if the wheels come off of the car, right? So what I think is happening, and this has been going on for quite some time, is that people in the church, especially men in the church, look around and they go, where are all the dudes? And you know where they are? They're right here. They're in the manosphere. They're watching me. They're watching Ryan. They're watching, Andrew Tate. They're watching Kevin Samuels, who was a quote unquote pastor at some point. I don't know if that ever got confirmed, but the fact of the matter is that the men who were in the church, there's nothing left for them in the church. In fact, the church is actively hostile to guys right now. So where else are they going to go? They're going to look for it. They're going to look for it in the manosphere. They're going to say, well, where are the guys? Where's my tribe? Where are the guys I can go lift with? Where are the guys I can go fish with? And I think it kind of pisses off a lot of guys who are very convicted of the faith, and they want to come at us for like stealing away their men. It's like, no, they came to us. We didn't go into the church and go, hey guys, come over here, come across the street to the red pill. So I see this going on. I wanted to ask you guys, I mean, was that your experience? Was that like, did you stop and go, where the hell is everybody? And maybe we need to start like looking at outside the church.
I stopped going with my brother early on. I mean, we were after about 17 years old. We were playing in the youth group. And I remember this is when I confronted the emotionality of the church, and that being the main point, because I figured that if there was this Holy Spirit discernment, I could go up there and totally lie my balls off and act like I was having the greatest time on stage. So my brother and I were like, great, I'm going to grab some beers. We're going to drink these guys and just do this like a rock show and have a great time and see if the Holy Spirit comes and blasts this place or not. And that's exactly what we did. And everyone went crazy that night. And I was like, okay. And it was kind of this little click that happened within my brain at the time. And we got confronted, they were like, hey, were you guys drinking? I was rebellious, and I don't recommend anyone do this. It was very egotistical and narcissistic of us to do that test on everybody. But we did. And after that, I was just like, this is just a place of emotions. This is not something that is based on fundamental reason. And these people just want a place to feel good about what they're doing. And I left. And then my brother and I came back to the faith in our mid-20s after playing in bands for a long time. And, the world's never enough. Pleasure is never enough. Hedonism is never enough. It's not going to fill your holes. It's not going to fill you with purpose. It's never going to be enough. And then we got to that point and we said, hey, we're going to go back to our roots. We went up to a cabin in Alaska, quit drinking, and climbed up mountains and just got in tune with God's creation. And that was the beginning. And to answer your question, Rollo, this happened instinctually. We just started meeting up because this is where we found church happening. And when I say church, I really want to distinguish two different ideas of what church is. There's a building, and everyone says church is a building, but this is church, what we're doing right now. That is the definition of what church is. That's what I want to drive like a silver spike into these kids' brains and adults' brains. That is what church is where two or more are gathered. Get the building out of your brain. It's a nice little warm nest where you will do, you will have your nuts chopped off. But essentially, like Rollo, you were saying, go hunting, go fishing. If you like to do some type of hobby, go bodybuilding, whatever it is that you like to do, find men like-minded and go out and do those things with those men regularly and have church.
Yeah. And I think for me, I was just attending one of these modern mega churches and completely disconnected. It was I could be just watching this online, and any quote men's group I attended, I just did not connect with these men. And so fortunately, we got connected at the gym and then ended up realizing we share basically we share a faith, we share all of our interests are very similar. And thus we started the group that we did. But I think, that leads to the other problem of the Christian men that are in the church, because there's obviously a decent amount. They are not ones that, I don't know, they're a little odd. Let's just put it that way. Some of them are there's the socially awkward types. A lot of them are just feminized. They don't they're overweight. They're not healthy. Obviously it's not all of them. But that's just, I'd say, a large majority. And that's one thing we always talk about is that pastor that's getting up there that's obese on Sunday talking, morally at you about something, and then he's just they completely ignore gluttony.
Yeah, they want to talk about your lustful sins, but they don't want to talk about their lustful sins for cake.
Yeah, and it's an environment that it's let's just do it ourselves.
Are you guys familiar with Pastor, was it Driscoll?
Mark Driscoll.
I've known of this guy since the late 2010s, I think, maybe 2009 through 2012. And then he had sort of his fall from grace from Mars Hill and all that stuff. And I'm very aware of what was going on. So when people go, "Oh, you don't know what's going on," no, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think there was supposed to be some sort of revival of masculinity in the church, at least up in which was in Seattle, I think it was. And
I think so, because I was up there in Washington at that time.
It was almost this effort, this really kind of lame effort to get guys back into the church. So they got MMA fighters out there, and they had all this stuff that they used to hate on all the time. It's a blood sport. Now suddenly it's oh, well, they're going to come and witness, they're MMA fighters, and now it's cool. You want to talk about Christian kosher? There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. But I looked at Mark Driscoll, and I think he was trying to make something happen, but I think he was just sort of like flailing around doing it. It seems kind of contrived, let's just say. I think there needs to be some sort of genuine sincerity if there's ever going to be any kind of masculine reform in a church. But I think it has to start with guys like you. I'm giving you a compliment here. I think that it has to start with guys such as yourself who go, you know what? We're going to do things different. We're not going to go try to reform this church because it's pretty much hopeless. We're going to go out and meet at the gym. We're going to go out and have, churches at the beach where we're going to go surf fishing, right? We'll go at the gun range, whatever it is. Or we're going to fix a car, right? I don't know, whatever you guys want to play chess, right? But it's by guys for guys, really. And I think that's really hard to. And so what people are going to say, and I'm sure I'm going to get this in the chat. Well, that's Islam. It's by guys for guys. Yeah. I mean, for now it's just taking a little bit longer to be assimilated. I see inch by inch, little by little, the westernized gynocentric social order is working its way into assimilating even mainstream Muslims right now. And they don't want to hear that, but I see it little by little. Now, it's granted, it's probably the last holdout, but it's Christianity was an easy sell, was an easy assimilation for women because it preaches forgiveness. And so everything that you've done in your past can be forgiven. Like I'm washed away all my ledger, right? And I think that's one of the biggest appeal of Christianity for women is that they can go through like sort of their party years, get to be about 29, 30 years old and go, you know what? I better get right with God. And no, it's like it's the prodigal son narrative. And I'm going to come back to the faith and really the prodigal son narrative is not about it's not about the prodigal son. It's about the people welcoming back the prodigal son. Because the people welcome that person back have their faith reaffirmed because that guy went out there, fell flat on his ass and came back and says, you know what? You had it right all along. That's what they want. Reaffirmation.
What they miss, Rollo, is that you may be forgiven of your sins. God forgives you. That's good. But I don't have to, just because you're forgiven doesn't mean don't have to judge you by what your past is.
Mm-hmm.
Like you still have a consequence. Like there's still consequences. God forgives us of our sins, but we still have to face the consequence in life.
Unless you're female, and then you don't have to.
No. Them too. Although the church may teach you wrong, but
I mean, faith-wise, yes.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's where it's wrong at, right? See, that's where the doctrine is wrong. That's where they have twisted it and flipped it upside down. It's like, oh yeah, she was a hoe in the streets, but you know what? She came back and she's now singing in the worship band.
She's a porn star. She's a reformed porn star. And now she married the youth pastor.
Doesn't mean I want to get with her. You know what I'm saying?
Just you have to either. But like the other thing is like when you have to be commercially viable, if you have a single women's ministry or a single mother's ministry, and by the way, there are major conventions for like at Orlando and Vegas and wherever they hold, maybe not Vegas, but wherever they hold these conventions, they have single Christian women's mothers conventions for the express purpose of finding a guy who's going to wife them up and find a man with benefits, right? And if it's not them, then it's going to be the Lord, and you just got to pray hard enough, and that guy's going to show up on your front door. And I think that's maybe even a more dangerous position to really be in, because you're telling guys that God wants them to. It's pardon my French, but this is a Dalrockism: man up and marry those sluts. That's what it comes down to. And you're essentially signing up for your own cuckoldry, and God wants you to be a cuckold by wifing up the single mom because she's been forgiven. God forgave her. Why can't you? And
well, that's very demented and twisted and disgusting. I don't think that has anything to do with what the Bible.
Again, we got to separate faith and doctrine. The doctrine will want you to do that.
You need to be reading your Bible.
Yeah, otherwise not what the Bible says at all.
Into these types of things.
Yeah, I know.
One thing you bring up, away from women like that a lot, and I think this is a sort of a linchpin on this whole thing, is you bring up happiness. And we've talked about emotionalism being so powerful in today's culture and vibes, like don't kill my vibe. We live in a world that's all just completely lost any type of will power and dignity, so that your sole purpose is to make sure other people are feeling all right. And it is not a husband's job to make his wife happy. That is not the purpose of leadership, is to make happiness for your wife or your kids. It's to lead. And that means making the hard choices at the hard times when no one else wants to make those choices. And you say, we're going this way and we're going to do this together. And it's not going to be easy, but we're going to do that. And a wife will bitch and moan. And that's what's going to happen. And guys need to be okay with that and be like, that's part of life. Have patience, move on and continue, because that's never going to go away.
He'll never hear that sermon.
And I'll tell you one thing also. A lot more Christian guys need to open up the Rational Male and read about it. They need to get educated on the way that women think instead of the way that women want us to think that they think.
Or the way the pastor tells you how virtuous women are and how close to God they are more than you. I mean, that's another thing that's getting preached. But I wanted to point out, Rollo, you said something about the love sermon, right? And they always read Ephesians 5:25. That's what it is. And
what is that? Can you recite? Yeah. Can you recite that?
I can recite it for you, sir.
Even the devil knows.
Husband, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by washing her with water through the word. The word, that's the scriptures. Okay. But that's where always the pastors stop. For some reason, like they don't like reading much before that. Because if you read in 5:22,
commercially viable, that's why.
Wives, submit to your husbands as you do to the Lord. So you want to talk about love, that's fine. We could love the wives, but if you're not going to be correcting the husbands on love without correcting the wives on submission, then you are failing that relationship as a pastor. You are failing that marriage, your flock, your congregation, if you do not teach that. Because all I hear, especially with pastors on that sermon, is like they do it like this: husbands, love your wives, like Christ said, like Christ loved the church. And wives, submit to your husbands, and pray, bless you guys, talk to you guys later. Amen. That's a Sunday sermon when they want to go over Ephesians. But you want to talk about love, you have to talk about the full concept of it, but they don't. And see, that's the one thing I agreed with Doug Wilson on one of his videos is that the pastors are preaching to only half the congregation. And the one in the group that you cannot preach to right now are the evangelical women of the church. They are the untouched people that you can't come at all. And he's right. And although he battled with Del Rock and many blogs, I read them all the ones that you sent me, like it was like blowing my mind because he totally pivoted from what he used to say to what he's saying now.
Because it's more commercially viable for him to be an influencer pastor than it was back then when he was going to come at Delrock. That's the thing is I when we were discussing the title of the show and what is the red pill compatible with Christianity, I've always said yes.
Absolutely. I didn't
see any problem with it whatsoever. I think that the thing that really kind of rubbed Christians the wrong way is that it took a pickup artist to say, look at what's going on in your church. Look at the situation with the women here. Look here, this is female nature. Why aren't you guys calling this out? You're of all people, of all convictions. Why are you not calling this out? You used to back in the day, and you don't do. And I think it was sort of almost like an insult or slap in the face for like the devoted, the prodigal son, right? The people who were actually defenders of the faith. Suddenly they go, damn, he's right, and they can't say he's not right, because they see exactly what's going on. So they got to either find some cope to work around it. But I mean,
there's so many misconceptions too. They see, clips of Fresh and Fit and think that's the red pill.
Oh, they're going to strongman everything.
So that should we dig into some of those specific questions?
Yeah, you want to do that?
Hold on, before we do, I've got some stats here, just really quick.
Okay.
It would not be a good show unless I throw some stats out here. This is from Pew Research. Okay, the rise of religious nuns looks similar in data from Pew Research and the General Survey Studies. Okay, so this is as recently as the 1990s, about 90% of U.S. adults identified as Christian. In 2007, the share was at 78%. Today, that number is down to 64%. Since 2007, the share of adults who identify as religious nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not nuns, has grown from 16% to 29%. These are the religious, or these are the spiritual but not religious people. Just so we're all clear there, because I'm sure we've heard of that before. And this is the other stat here from Pew Research. 1/3 of U.S. adults believe in a higher power of some kind, but not in God as described in the Bible. Do you believe in God or not? Yes, 80%. Believe in God described in the Bible, 56%. 23% believe in some other higher power or spiritual force. The people who don't believe in God, still 33% of the combined there, and 9% of the no's. but do believe in some higher power or spiritual force. So you don't believe in God, but you do believe in some sort of like, you believe in the Jedi creed. And then there is the nuns do not believe in any higher. These are the atheists, 10% of people. So I want to put these out there just so we have sort of a frame of reference here, because I don't think enough, like you're not going to get those stats from Hafiz. You're not going to get those stats from anybody. You're going to get those from me because I'm the muckraker, I guess. But I want to put those out there just as a point of reference so we can get to those questions. But I want to make sure that we get we see what the state of affairs are right now.
And I want to point out why those stats are the way they are is because why people more spiritual, because they know that there's something out there. They have this belief, but why they avoid Christianity or any type of Abrahamic religion? Because there's a requirement. You can't just come in and be all. You can't just do whatever you want and be good. No, Christianity has a requirement. You have to do certain things in order to get into heaven. Islam, you have to do certain things in order to get into heaven. Like there's a requirement, and people don't want to not have to measure up. I don't want to have to measure up to the bar. Why do I have to do something? Why can't I just be accepted?
I disagree with you. I think that people want to measure up to bars, and I think that is a lie that's evolving and falling flat on its face. And that's why I think
I believe you're right.
Islam is the last holdout, is because they actually do have their nuts connected to their body, and they are actually saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we believe, and it's inspiring to young men because there's too much of this have your cake and eat it garbage. There's you're
probably
gonna
a
live
gender.
And you will die.
I totally agree. Well, I'm saying, but the reason why they're adopting to more spirituality because they don't want to have to fall short to the standard that the Bible holds up to them.
I'd also like to see the gender breakdown on those spiritualities.
I would too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would assume
more female.
Let me just real quick, because I put this in the book actually, is when I was doing the research, it took me 3 years to do this. Thank you very much. So I'm going to say something here. When I was doing the research for the book, I was looking at Islam. I looked at Christianity, all flavors of Christianity, Catholicism, blah, blah, blah. And Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox. Thank you very much. Just because I know people are going to, but what about Orthodox? What about the convention of 1868? I'm like, okay. Sikhs, Hinduism, Krishna, by the way, Krishnaism is enjoying a resurgence amongst women right now. Did you guys know that Tulsi Gabbard is a Krishna?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was at Times Square in New York, and doing some shooting. They had a massive Krishna thing right
Krishna
there.
thing. Yeah, I think Krishna is
females.
It's like Christianity. Christianity without the judgment for women. That's why. So I'm doing all this background check, and they're doing everything, and in every single one, and including to a lesser degree even Catholicism, in every single one of these religions, there is it's based on works. It's based on acts. You have to earn your way into heaven. You have to earn your salvation. There's only one religion that doesn't require that, and that's Christianity. Christianity is by grace we're saved, right? I mean, that's the difference between, like, say, when Martin Luther's, Protestantism versus, Catholicism. Either you're saved or you're not saved, and it's not because all have fallen short of the grace of God, and none are worthy to. We're all pieces of shit, basically.
But people fixate on it.
The more I work in this field, the more I understand that.
One thing that people fixate on is that salvation. Yes, you're going to get into the door. But once you get into the door, as Glenn said, you're going to have to count on Judgment Day for your actions. And once you do that, there's a hierarchy in heaven. They talk about crowns. They talk about different dispensing of gifts when you get to heaven. So it's not just like, accept Jesus on your last day, you're going to be the same as the guy that lived a wonderful life. It's just not the way it works. And I think that people believe that, and they see the hypocrisy in that, and it's a problem. But it's not the way it works biblically.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Well, okay. Let me see if I can parse this out a little bit, because when I made that observation, people came at me because they thought, and maybe I was right in this. I was arguing that Christianity, in the sense that it's like the New Testament Christianity, is a very feminine religion. Like people saying it's a slave's religion, blah, blah, blah. It's based on grace. It's based on forgiveness. It's based on compassion. They want to say, well, Jesus was an alpha man. He flipped the tables of the money changers in the temple. Like, okay, well, but the basis of the faith is based on forgiveness, and there's nothing you can do to earn that. You just have to accept the gift that is the gospel, right? If you go and you look at the Old Testament, though, that is most definitely masculine. That is like fires of hell and let's part the Red Sea and let's like, strike people dead and the plagues of Egypt kind of stuff. There's a lot more masculinity, I think, in the Old Testament than there is in the New Testament. And people really came at me for making that. I just made the observation. Remember, I'm not saying I think one way or the other, but I'm just saying that there's definitely a more masculine side of the Bible in the Old Testament and a more feminine side of the Bible in the New Testament. And so, like when you think of like conventionally feminine attributes, you'll find those in the New Testament. If you look at conventionally masculine attributes or things that we would qualify as being masculine, you're going to find those primarily in the Old Testament. And I'm relying right now on a book called Alpha God by Dr. Hector Garcia, who made these observations as well. So I got to give credit where it's due. But then if you go and you look at, like, if you were to talk about Islam right now, I mean, would we say that's a feminine religion or a masculine religion? I think we'd probably call it a masculine religion. If you looked at Judaism for like in an Orthodox sense, would we call that masculine? Because it's technically an Abrahamic religion and therefore a patriarch. Abraham was a patriarch, right? So they're definitely very masculine religions. If you look at Eastern religions, they tend to look a little bit more feminine, a little more feminized. So you're looking at different aspects of the feminine and the masculine in how we sort of characterize and we worship God. Like we look at God in the Abrahamic religions, we call him he. Always with a capital H. Why is that? Why do we characterize him as the father and not the mother God? Because it's a patriarchal religion that is primarily focused on masculinity. Whereas if you're looking at, like, say, the Christian side of things, where it's based on forgiveness and compassion and love thy neighbor, like, offer him the other cheek kind of thing, that's much more of a female way of thinking about things. So, people are going to throw all kinds of hate at me for even making the observation, but I think that is something that we are struggling with right now because of the gender imbalance that we see in our gynocentric social order. So what does a religion by women for women look like, as opposed to what does a religion by men for men look like? And I think we're on the cusp of seeing something like some kind of what Dr. Everett Piper called this syncretic religion, where like this mixing, this amalgamation of bits and pieces of different religions together that come out as like tolerance and love is love and love wins and no one's illegal and open borders and we should all have drag queen story hour in the churches and the libraries, right?
Yep.
How about tolerance?
Yeah, I think too the you'll see more of this talk of like how you are God as like your own person. And that's, I think, some of that spiritual, but not religious crowd, they kind of view themselves as God, and they usually use the term like universe and stuff instead of God. And yeah, where this goes, it'll be interesting. And I would probably disagree like with the feminine versus masculine dynamic of the Old versus New Testament. I think when you take in the full context of like what's kind of going on there too, it's like, the Old Testament is mostly just like reading history. The New Testament is more you're reading prescriptions, not so much reading history. Mm-hmm. So I would just say, like, I don't know. I wouldn't probably.
I wouldn't call it necessarily feminine either. I mean, although like there's the historical side of the Old Testament, you got wars, you got people dying, you got a whole lot of killing, got to kill these people off. But Jesus doesn't come off as a bitch either, though. Like, sorry for those that get mad at me for cursing. I'm not that close of a God, all right. But like in Matthew,
we have an understanding.
Yeah, we're right good. We're on a good turn.
Right there with you.
But like Matthew 10:34 through 36 says, and this is Jesus speaking, right? I think, yeah, he's like, don't think I have come here to bring peace to earth. No, I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set man against his father, daughter against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemy will be those of his own household. Okay, so like this is not necessarily like that doesn't sound peaceful at all to me. That doesn't sound like we're singing Kumbaya and there's a whole lot of forgiveness. No, if you read, like, you get closer in like Revelations is a very, very disastrous chapter or book in the Bible. It does not show a whole lot of grace and peace. And what about the people whose lamps are out of oil? God just says, I don't know you, writes them off. So there is some, elements there that's not like, oh, kumbaya-ish, but I get the premise where you're coming at, because it's the way that the doctrine is being taught. It's the way that they're actually diving into scriptures and utilizing it to kind of push that message further, because that's more attractive than the fire and brimstone message that they use.
Makes it, again, it's commercially appealing though, too.
Exactly.
Female asses.
Commercially appealing to women, to men. And you said, Rollo, is like, we don't have these wars to fight. We don't have these battles to fight for men, right? And what we're talking about right now is like swords, like battles, like, very physical altercations where, men are being men, right? Scars, dude, blood. We're talking about death here. And Jesus is highly intelligent human being. He deals with the politics. He deals with the people. He deals with his own disciples. If you look at his life and what he accomplished in those years, the dude was God. I mean, literally, I don't know of anyone else who could accomplish what he did, despite resurrecting from the dead. Just despite that completely, just get rid of it. How he did it, because he was very intelligent. He was very calculative. Very calculative individual, chose his words very specifically. And if you look farther in, what happens? The bloodshed leads to what? More bloodshed. So you have to ask yourself, when does this end? How do we find a better way out? Christ was trying to give this to people. That's why he resonated so strongly and continues to, because he provides a solution for this. Now, a lot of men don't want to do the hard work. They don't want to study. They want to get out with these battle axes and think they're going to go out and get, chop people in half. That's not the battle you're fighting nowadays. Read the end of Ephesians. Read the end of the Ephesians and what Paul tells you what's going on here. He says, finally, be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of the evil in heavenly places. Therefore, take up your whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand the evil day, having done all and stand firm. And then he goes on to tell you what pieces of these armor is, what they are, and how to put them on. But he's doing this so he can paint and anthropomorphize for people. This is the battle you're fighting, guys. This is where the war is fought. It's not fought over here anymore. It's fought in here, and it's fought.
Do you think people still get that? Do you think they see that and they read that and they go, oh yeah, okay, I get the metaphor. I get the analogy. I get the prose, the hyperbole. I don't think because I think people are like, especially guys in the last millennial and the Gen Z, I think they're very super literalist about things. And I get it, and I can appreciate the analogy. I mean, because Jesus spoke in parables, right? They were stories that were meant to teach. And I think what would happen right now, if Jesus was here today and he was sort of like giving us these parables, people are like, well, that doesn't really mean what you think it means, because the guy, and they would dissect it, the actual parable, as opposed to the message that it was being said. I think that maybe that's one of the reasons why Christianity's, at least for men, has lost kind of appeal for the last two generations, is because they're much more literal based, I guess. Autistic, I guess.
I was autistic.
Okay, I want to get to that. We kind of got off track. I do want to get to
that's a good point.
That Glenn came up. But before we do, I need to get to the super chats real quick. Rollo, what do you think of people choosing the worst of the manosphere, calling it red pill, and then trying to shame men? I will talk about that probably tomorrow, because I'm going to get into it with this new study about it's the FBI coming at the red pill, and then also this new study by, I forget the dude's name, Aaron something or other, who's like, he's part of Peterson Academy, wants to study incels. So I will definitely address that tomorrow, though. So long live the patriarchy. Hoorah.
Did you guys see my FBI video I did last night?
No.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Let's see. I got the Bible speaks of not forsaking gathering together, but it doesn't say where. In the Old Testament, they met in homes as well as synagogues. I don't see why you can't go meet enough. My favorite place to go is just like, I feel like if I have a moment where I'm like sort of like by myself and I can be contemplative and sort of get with God, it's when I'm fishing. If that sounds weird to you, especially when I'm fly fishing for some reason.
The
100%.
community is important though. You can't be just running
I'm
around by
not
yourself.
gonna say it's not, but I'm just saying like it's where you're at, and it's not a building. So
Well, Christ went away oftentimes from his disciples for long periods of time to pray alone all the time, to be by himself, not on the phone, not on the TV, not with some garbage hanging out, just to be alone. I think a lot of young guys don't have enough.
no, because they're
don't do that enough.
distracted. Well, because we
They don't
multitask.
fast. They don't fast. They don't take any of these things literally.
You get offline, man.
These are powerful.
They're in the chat right now.
You can't even get them to fast off of the YouTube,
Yeah.
Well, it's the TLDR generation. That's why. They say you're not going to get people away from TikTok long enough to really be alone with their thoughts. Are you kidding? That's the worst nightmare. To have to stare at a ceiling for half an hour.
Well, that's what they're craving. That's what battle is.
And that's when I do my best thinking of my best ideation. I have to get away from this crap. Otherwise, I can't come up with new crap.
Yep.
I got this, and I have to use this. I would be remiss if I didn't.
I know who my God is. Hallelujah.
Thank you, Doug Chisholm, for the $49.99. Thanks for this conversation, Rollo. Your work has been life-changing for me. Second only to my Christian beliefs. Why, thank you, sir. And I got one more. You get You're welcome. All right, now go. What's the questions?
All right, so first, Rollo, what can you describe the praxeology? What is the praxeology?
I can give you
not an ideology.
No, I can give you the literal the definition of it. And no, it's not the monetary version of it. It's the actual classic Greek version of it, which is it's basically the study of human behavior, in that human behavior has a purpose to it. That's why it dovetails very nicely with evolutionary psychology. So essentially what it is, and by the way, it's a loose science. So we write it in pencil. We don't write it in pen. So if we're wrong about something, we can come back, erase it, and write whatever the new rule is, right? And so because we're not using praxeology to create an ideology, we're not using it to create even really a predictive framework. We're just using it for understanding. Now, can what we learn from it lead to that? Yeah, absolutely. But by itself, it's just a collection of data and a collection of knowledge. It is what Ryan Stone has called the Chilton Manual of Human Behavior. So that's really what praxeology is. It's not an ideology. It's not good versus bad. It's just what is.
And now, why is the red pill amoral? Because I think that's where a lot of
should be, because okay, it's whenever you say amoral, people think immoral. I'm not saying it should be bad or immoral. I'm not saying it should be moral. I'm saying it should be in between. It should be unclouded by morality or conscience or anything else. It's just what is. It's understanding factual absolutism. Is this true? Is this not true? Whether it's good or bad, how you're going to use it and what's the best practices with this knowledge is immaterial to finding out whether 2 + 2 = 4. What you do with 4, that's your ideology. That's your good or bad. That's your judgment call. So that's why I always say that the red pill should be fundamentally amoral, asocial, apolitical, aracial, because nobody ever wants to throw those ones in there, because I threw those in there in that post, by the way. But all they fixate on is a-religious, which is another thing that I said. And it's not because I think that it's not applicable. It just has to be, if we're going to have an objective, factually absolute understanding of reality, it has to be devoid of anything and I know it's impossible to do that, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't make our best stab at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So this is where we're going to get into the religious aspect and fellas from the disciples. The one thing we say, I envy you guys because I don't have that group out there you guys have. I wish I had a group out here in LA like that.
Start one up.
Oh, it's me and myself and my dad. That's about it.
That's all you need.
But start somewhere. It has to start sometime.
So premarital sex is a sin.
Now,
actually, I might be going to Vegas. Premarital sex is a sin, and the Bible talks about it. It should not be done. Sex within a marriage, anything outside of marriage is sexually immoral. So how can, Christians understand this? And I think Mike really knows this better than anybody. And still adopt the red pill praxeology of understanding that, our innate nature is to, our sexual innate nature is to spread our seed, right? To have unlimited access to sexuality. And I break this down from my perspective, and tell me if I'm wrong. It's either or. You could either, have one wife and her be your innate, all the sexual access could be coming from her, or it's you want multiple women, you know. And from a Christian worldview, a biblical worldview, you want that wife to be your access to unlimited sexuality, because that's morally where sex is supposed to be, within the confines of a marriage. Is that what you guys all agree?
Yeah, I would 100%.
So, Mike, how do you because I love this part. Go ahead, Mike. You ready?
Go ask.
Mike, are you sexually active? Have you ever been?
No, I still holding strong on the keeping my V card.
Exactly. So it can be done. So you're able to adopt a red pill praxeology and still keep your biblical values and principles, and still, you know, how do you bridge the two there?
Well, I think it's just anything in life. You have stuff your brain innately tells you that you want to do, and it doesn't mean it's like the right thing to do because you want to. Like, a lot of that guy's comment, I think, comes down to, number one, the fallen nature of humans in general, and then number two, I think, like we talk a lot about in our podcast how there's like a duality of a lot of what God has provided us, and I kind of view it as like his first comment, I think, is about like violence or aggression. And it's like, okay, with men, testosterone makes us behave a kind of a certain way. And you can take that kind of two different paths. You can be very productive with it and very ambitious and be like this great provider, protector for your family, or you can turn into a criminal with it, or like a warlord with it. Like we have this element of choice that we always have, and there's a duality of what a lot of our innate nature gives us. You know, same with like just with like being super ambitious, for example, like that has great things about it and has bad things about it, where it depends where you go. You could be you could build companies, or you could be super greedy with it and earn money in like criminal ways. Like there's everything, I think, has this kind of good or bad version of it. And so like men's sexuality, I think without it, the world wouldn't even be exist. I think everything we do comes down to it in our drive. And I think like if it was not what it was, it would be really interesting to see where the planet Earth is now. I think we're, you know, on Mars right now because of men's sex drive, really. So I think if you harness these innate drives in the right direction, they're extremely productive and valuable. But you can, like with anything, go down a different path with it.
Yeah, I don't see how a guy would want to have multiple children otherwise. He's got to want to have sex. And, you know, I think about what meekness means, and it's to have a sword but keep it sheathed, or what Teddy Roosevelt talks about, carry a big stick and walk softly, something of that nature. And probably
about that.
But the idea is that even Christ, even God, you know, he's all powerful. What does he decide to do? He doesn't just wipe things out. You know, he shows a measure of grace and mercy within what he does, even though he is all powerful. And that is the idea. It's just because you have testosterone running through your testicles doesn't mean you have to F everything that comes across your way, nor fight everybody. That's not the way you're going to get ahead in life.
And it doesn't make you less red pill aware not practicing it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now, Rollo, you would say like the red pill is just a set of tools, right? These are tools for you to utilize the way that you see fit, that fits your worldview.
For you to, it's equipment. It's education, it's tools, it's building materials. It's, if you like canvas and paint, whatever analogy you would like.
Yeah, but you don't have to use all of them if you don't want to.
Well, I mean, it's the same. Okay, so I look at it this way: is I look at it like 48 laws of power. Okay, all those laws are fundamentally true. Are you going to use some of them ethically? Probably not. I mean, especially what is it? Get others to do all the work and take all the credit, right? I mean, that's basically plagiarism. It is a law of power. And you better know it, because somebody else will probably use it against you. But does that mean you're going to go, you know what? I think this sounds great. This is a great suggestion. I think I'll do this, right? No, you could say it's immoral. It's unethical, however you choose to frame that. You know, it doesn't mean you're going to use all of those rules in your own life because you're like, that doesn't sit right with me. That's the judgment call. So that's a problem that I think a lot of people have. You can't tell people information without telling them how to feel about that information. Mm-hmm. And so the problem that I think people have is if I tell them information that challenges these very deeply held beliefs that they've grown up on, especially if it's a blue pill belief. Like, and I don't mean like religious. I mean like they're very invested in like, oh, you know, carrying Joni's books home from work and you got to be nice to her and be her friend. And, you know, like all the classic blue pill shit that we talk about all the time. You intermingle that with Christianity, and that is a tough nut to crack. You got to go through some real traumatic shit before you can reach a guy like that, because his blue pill conditioning is wrapped up in his religious convictions, and that is hard. You make, and then add to that, they're influencers and they're making money off of reinforcing and self-reaffirming the blue pill beliefs that are mixed with their Christian or their whatever their religious beliefs. Then you get someone like Hafiz, you know, or Ruslan. You're never going to tell them anything, because anytime you would even approach talking about the blue pill kind of stuff, it offends their sense of religious conviction because it's wrapped up in the religious conviction. So that's why I always say it needs to be a praxeology, and you need to be able to separate the two. I'm not saying that I'm not saying, for instance, one of the observations we make in the red pill is infanticide. Okay. When a new alpha gorilla or chimp, whatever, comes into a troop, the alpha male tends to kill the offspring of the rival alpha male that was there. The act of killing his offspring sends his new female harem into estrus. That's some pretty ugly shit, but that's what happens. And we can make comparisons. Like we can look at how when a woman kicks out the biological father out of the family and brings in a new boyfriend, that boyfriend has a 100 times more likely to beat or to abuse the children of the prior baby daddy, right? There's an analogy there. We don't want to look at that ugly truth. Now, is that God that made us that way? Can we overcome? Yes, absolutely. We can overcome that. We can certainly say, you know what? I realize that that's my innate drive to want to do stuff like that. I want to kill a motherfucker sometimes, right? But I have to like control myself not to do stuff like that. Or we can't just go out with a hard on and walk around with a hard on all day. We have to be able to have some self-control, especially as men, because there's a higher onus of self-control over men, right? Especially right now. Maybe in the past for women, but not so much now. Because women have been set free, man. They're unfettered hypergamy, unfettered, slut walks and everything else. But we men still have that onus and that burden of performance and that burden of self-control. And the times that we see a guy who loses that self-control, that's what defines us as a gender, as a sex. So if a guy loses it and loses his shit and kills his family and commits suicide as a result of that, that's all men. All men are like this, right? And we're like, wait, no, not all men are like that, but you can't say that because men have responsibility and we have no authority.
But I see what's going on, and you make a good point when this is a world of extremes. It's like they course correct like this, all the way over to the left, all the way over to the right. Either he's a masculine man and he's getting in fights and he's banging all the chicks and he doesn't give a shit about women and treats them like garbage, or he's a total blue pill moron that just carries books home, opens the door and is the doormat, he just has no spine and no way of discerning a situation. What we need is men that can draw the line and say a man does
balance, man.
I'm not seeing that's the thing is like everybody thinks
it's not so easy to go one way or the other 100% of the time. You have to use your brain. You have to pray.
Make choices.
Everybody thinks that the red pill is
God. Ask him, what should I do right now?
Everyone thinks that the red pill is deterministic. Like, we're all just animals. All those red pill guys, they just care about getting their dick wet. That's all they care about because where's an explicit? Like, that's what they think that we're. It's like, no, dude. We're pointing out biological, evolutionary facts, not how you should feel about them, not what best practices they are. This is what is. You decide whatever the hell you are going to do with that, and it's up to you to do that. But the very fact that Rollo Tomasi, some schmuck who takes a keen interest in evolutionary psychology, the fact that I'm the one saying that pisses people off because they really want they want to be told by somebody who's a better authority, I guess, than me. But it's like the truth is the truth, no matter where it's coming from, right? If it's factual absolutism, it's factual absolutism.
Yeah, so it reminds me of like when the materialists came about. Philosophers and scientists before the materialists came about, God and science were like together. They were always together.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the mathematicians were religious guys. They loved the Lord. Same with musicians, same with all this stuff. The point is like when that divided, it became almost like Christians nowadays. When you come at them with a red pill, they're like, oh, I can't take information anymore, and that is a serious
It
issue.
was almost like when they thought about like evolution and the Big Bang. God, like creation.
Right.
It's like as if God couldn't have used the Big Bang to create the Earth. Like
Right.
Well, I told you to read that book, Glenn.
Yeah, I bought it.
You know who gave me that? Who suggested that I should read that was my very atheist father before he died.
Really?
And
Wow.
it's a great, but I still have it in my bookcase right now. It's a great book, and it kind of finds common ground between religion and science, because the very fact, and I wrote this in the intro of religion, is that anytime you put Evo in front of biology, Evo psychology, Evo what evolutionary whatever, you either like, you're either too happy or too pissed off about it. Like the religious set think that that's an attack. Anytime you use evolution in a sentence, it's like, oh, they're attacking my religion. They think that God isn't real. No, man. Can you just like settle down, chill out for a second? Perhaps there is a God, and perhaps that evolution is the way he gets shit done. Is that okay? Can we like maybe try to talk about that a little bit? No. And by the way, it's not just the religious side. It's also the atheist side too.
Yeah.
Because then it's magical thinking on your part. And then it comes down to knowledge versus imagination. And we can get into that if you want to, but I want to back to that one point real quick, is when you were talking about, is it possible to like sort of reconcile the red pill with Islam or Christianity or Judaism or whatever else? I think it absolutely is. And I think that it was in some senses, a lot of the particularly the Abrahamic religions, but also any patriarchal male-centered religion has already accounted for a lot of this stuff. It's just we've forgotten, why
the data just proves it.
Well, because it's and this is I really wanted to get into this. It's the difference between like factual truth and metaphorical truth. Okay, so metaphorical truth is, don't get near a porcupine because a porcupine can shoot its quills and it'll get you and you'll stand. It hurts like hell to get a porcupine quill in you. That's completely false. Porcupines can't spit their quills at you. But it's true, because it's better that the kids stay far away from the porcupine because you don't have to pull those damn quills out of you. And so it's the same thing as like, the reason why we think snakes and spiders and bugs are, or mice or whatever. We have this kind of like evolutionary firmware that makes us sort of like stay away from dead bodies, right? Why do we bury bodies? Well, because if we don't, we're probably going to catch a pathogen from those. Or if we don't burn the bodies, then we're probably going to catch something because necrotic flesh or something is going to, pestilence and everything else. So that finds its way into our religious practices, such as like, don't eat shellfish, don't eat pork, don't eat the hoofed animals, right? Why? Well, God said so. Well, there's a latent purpose to that, which is you're going to get trichinosis and die. But now we have cured pork and we can eat bacon and go, damn, this is good bacon, right? But we still have the religious side of things. Like, for instance, Myron from Fresh and Fit will not eat pork, will not even eat beef. I tried to get him to eat a slice of pizza one time. He's like, I'm like, what? Why? It's a halal or it's a haram because it had pepperoni on it. And I'm like, what's wrong with pepperoni? He's like, no, there's pork or there's something like that is not according to it's not halal food, right? And I'm like, okay, I can respect that. But I also understand the latent purpose to it. Now, that goes back to also the prohibitions, like you got your V card, right? So do I think that the proscriptions against premarital sex are a good idea? I think I understand the function. Absolutely. I absolutely understand the function of no sex before marriage because of all the things that go along with that, especially in our ancestral past, where it's like, if you're going to have sex with a woman, you most likely you're going to have a baby as a result of that. You're going to catch a disease, whatever else. We can make it a moral issue and talk about like, immorality and stuff. That's the metaphorical truth. The actual factual truth is if you bang a girl, especially back in the day before contraception, odds are you're probably going to have a baby with her. And then there's, the premarital, prearranged marriages. Like in Hindu cultures, that's a big deal. I mean, probably in the past it's been for Western cultures as well, but not so much now. But women bristle at the ideal of a prearranged marriage because it goes against hypergamy, and women, the worst thing in the world would be to have to like marry and fall in love with and have babies with a man not of her choosing. But from a practical perspective, like marriage and prearranged marriages are actually, when they are passed anyways, were a good idea. Because I don't want my daughter like marrying a bum. I want to be able to pick out the guy that she's going to get with and approve of that. Now, there's other ways, or there's compromises that you can make today. Like he asks you for the woman's hand in marriage, and it's a formality, and it's polite and it's chivalrous and everything else. But there's also a mechanic behind it. So the metaphorical truth is, oh, it's proper etiquette to go ask dad for my lady's hand in marriage. Okay, but what you're really saying is, I want to blend my family and my clan and my tribe with your tribe. That's the function of that act or that ritual, which we've completely forgotten about. All of the things, all the functions for rituals that we think are antiquated, or we think that they're bigoted, or they're sexist, or they're misogynist, or whatever else is, oh, we're not your property, fuck you. That whole thing had a purpose, and probably still does have a purpose if you think about it. But we think of it as sort of this antiquated, like metaphorical thing that nobody cares about anymore, but there was actually a function to it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And this kind of brings up, like, because we kept on saying innate nature. And I want to bring this up. Mm-hmm. So, they talked about, he said, like, we're biologically created to, reproduce, be promiscuous, all that stuff. The other one, he says our innate nature is to get jealous. Our violence and aggressive is to be sinful. Actually, this is where I want to correct them. I don't think being violent or aggressive is actually considered biblically a sin, because God told us to go to war at times. He told, he led that. So I don't think how could he be
kill off all the men folk and the boys and known men and save the virgins for yourself.
There's a difference between killing and murder.
Exactly. There's a difference. He said, thou shalt not murder, but you never said anything, thou shalt not kill. So that's another thing. So our innate nature, it was the best way to describe it. I see it as the flesh, what the Bible calls the flesh. And as a Christian, you're supposed to die to your flesh, right? So those innate natures, you can't suppress them. I haven't murdered anybody today. There's a few people I thought I wanted to.
Yeah.
Does it mean but I could suppress them and be obedient and not act on that way? So just because our innate natures, the red pill talks about our innate natures and what our drives that we have, are these desires to act on, that doesn't mean we have to act on them. Just because the red pill talks about them doesn't mean we have to act on them if it goes against our worldview, right? So that's where I was going to ask you, Rollo, like, when you talk about this, when you talk about our innate mating strategies, and you're just talking about it, if I'm correct, like, this is just what we naturally want to do, but doesn't mean that's what we should do, nor does it mean it's what we ought to do. This is just what our drive to do.
Well, there's a lot of our innate behaviors and our innate, like, evolved mental firmware is very immoral. If you think about it, it's very, that's why they say it's your sin nature, right? Well, why is that? Well, the metaphorical truth is that, men are fallen and they're sinful, and we need to be saved from ourselves. Well, yeah, if you go and you look at, like, the 7 deadly sins, pride, gluttony, blah, 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 all that stuff, all of those serve a very, very valid, pragmatic function for human beings. But in excess, they kind of screw things up for society.
Yep.
So yeah, I can imagine that, venery, pride, lust, gluttony, avarice. I can't even name all of them, but each one of those translates into a biological drive that was a survival adaptation for us for a very long time. So if we say, well, God hates a prideful spirit, right? Or God hates gluttony is a sin, right? Or what is it? Gossip, women gossiping is a sin. Well, why is that? Well, because it kind of causes a lot of antisocial results as they're doing that. So if you can say, well, I got to come back to, like, food prohibitions, like, if you can't eat ham because God says so, well, what's the real function behind that? Well, if you eat pigs, you're probably going to get trichinosis. If you gossip, shit's going to happen that is probably not that good. So keep your mouth, keep thy teeth together, right? or like avarice, or count to 10 before you lose your patience and you lose your cool. Gluttony, well, if you eat everything and you're a fat ass, you'll become a fat ass. And then second of all, nobody else gets to eat, and it like diminishes the tribe as tribe is weaker because you took too much, right? So there's checks and balances in the metaphorical truth of what is sinful and what is not. So there's the actual truth of, and again, this is not, I'm not talking about faith-based issues like what is cosmically speaking. I'm just talking about like down to earth right here in the nuts and bolts, physical world. When we apply those principles of like religious, like, I guess, rules and things like don't whack off, right? Don't have sex before marriage. Your dad's going to pick out he knows best for you, and he's going to pick out you a good husband. Like if I was able to pick out my daughter's husband, like my daughter is getting married this year. Thank you. The cat's out of the bag, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you. But and he came to me, asked for permission to marry my daughter. He's a Christian guy. He came to me, asked me, and she knew damn well that she had to have him do that, right? But and it seems like really quaint and cute, and it seems like like chivalry. Open the door for my lady kind of thing. Chivalry is not. It's not chivalry.
Chivalry works as feminism.
It's just plain pragmatic courtesy to do something. Chivalry is much different than what most people think it is.
Well, just think if women involved, especially when they're young, their fathers, which part of the problem is their lack of fathers today.
Oh yeah,
in their dating process, like how much better they would do.
Yeah,
they wouldn't have to run through like four guys that mess them up before they figure things out.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say is like I watched Tinder Swindler, and I watched these ladies on Tinder Swindler, and the guy, he's racketeering is basically what it is. And so he had this process and this way, of sort of suckering these girls into it, and he always knew who's going to be a good mark and who's not. And there's some personality and some, let's say, some personality conditions and some personal conditions that all these women shared. And when I'm watching the first woman saying, "Oh, I met the guy on Tinder, and 45 minutes later, I'm going down to the airport to jump on his private plane to go off to, Belarus or where the hell he's going," right? My first impression was, "Where's your dad? Where's your brother? Where's your uncle? Where's even just a good male friend who's going to go, you are not getting on that freaking plane. You will die. He will take you you will be sold into white slavery or something like that." Where's the guy? And the answer is nowhere, because no guy dares to be that authoritative to step in and say, "No, you're not going. You're not going because you will die. I know better than you. How dare you? I'll make my own decision. I'm going to follow my heart. It always leads me to the right place." That whole emotion, like feels before reels. That's what got that girl into 9 different bank loans. And after the first one, how come dad's not going, "I don't know if $30,000 is really a good idea to give this guy"? I'm like, why are we not seeing this?
Because mom's saying, "Fred,
my daughter, I would be like,
live her life."
Yeah, exactly. Oh, she's on her own. She does what she wants, right?
There's no families.
There's no that's what when people ask me like responsibility versus authority, that's one of the things that I said. Well, you're responsible for your daughter, yeah, but I have no authority over if I can't step in and say, "Nah, you're not getting on the Tinder Swindler's private jet." That would be me stepping in and exercising fatherly authority. You're not allowed to do that now. So
would you say, like, when it comes to like Mike being a virgin, right? Would you say, like, ideally in a perfect world, that is what would be best for both sexes?
Yeah,
where they're both naive, they have no knowledge of sex, and they get married and then they do their thing and figure it out together, right?
Well, that's my main problem with the prohibition. Like I understand the functionality of the practice, and I understand like being 29 years old and being a virgin is like that's Tim Tebow level like discipline.
Yeah.
So I told Mike he's my hero.
Yeah, exactly.
Not easy.
So hear me out. I understand that and I respect that because you have conviction. So that's self-control. So you have respectability for being able to do that. Now, I also see the realistic side of it, saying that like today, that kind of prohibition is really kind of untenable in this society. To be able to, like most, like in our ancestral past, right up until recent times, really right up until like the mid 60s during, hormonal birth control, the average age of first marriage back in 1965 was 19 for girls and 22 for guys. So to ask a guy and say, hey, you know what? You're probably not going to get married until you're 35 and don't touch your dick until that time. Yeah, that's from an evolutionary practical sense.
Biblical thing for masturbation anywhere. I mean, I don't know where that comes in. Like,
do what you got to do.
You want
There
to
isn't actually. There's nothing in there
to be able to do something. You can't
I
just
know.
sit around.
Well, what people will, but you know what Christian women will say is, well, that's sexual immorality because you got to eat.
Oh, we're going to get into that because we're going to get into that too.
Well, I just say I understand the conflict between the tenability of being able to eat ham or being able to stay a virgin until you're 29 or being able to, because in our evolutionary biological past, most people were reproducing by the time they were 15 or 17 for most of human history. And now we think it's still going to be okay because the holy book says stay a virgin until you're married. And then now you're 35 or 40. Then you get to Lolo Jones, who is freezing her eggs because she's this side. I think she's 40 now, and just on TikTok or whatever, just bawling her eyes out because she has faith. If she's for real, she's there saying, I'm still a virgin. I'm freezing my eggs because I want to have babies, but I still can't find the right dude. And hopefully God's going to, push him and make him come onto my doorstep pretty soon. Right. And but we're now at the point where she's got to freeze her eggs because she's going to, and once she gets to be menopause, forget it. She's done.
Yeah. Because I think I'll say, like, in theory, right? Because I think you said this before, like, if people if we lived in a society that didn't promote the sexuality that we did now, then yeah, ideally in a perfect world for both parties, it would be better if they were just virgins before they got married because they had nothing to.
The data shows it too.
Yeah, like they have nothing to go back on to say that it was a bad experience. You know what I mean? Like they're first, they have nothing to reflect it, like this one sucked or not. So I could see that. So that would support that aspect. But I agree. We in the society, in the culture that we live in today, even if Mike is the only virgin male in the world, the odds of him finding a woman that's that meets his standard and requirements and also being a virgin, yeah. That's like worse than you trying to find a girl finding a guy that meets all the 6'6s. You know what I mean? Like it's rare. It's gonna be more rare for Mike to find what he's looking for than the girls too, right? But
I would just view it as the morality and the following what God ultimately has designed us to do. It's a narrow path. It's not supposed to be easy. And cultures change over time. I'm pretty sure during the height of Rome, that culture would have been really hard to deal with it as well. So I think Christianity is not supposed to be easy, and you're supposed to look weird to culture. If you're fitting in with culture and just bending the knee to culture, where's your convictions at? Where's your backbone in that? So yeah.
Hey, I got to read this real quick. Jesus talks about lusting after women as being the same as adultery, right? If you lust after a woman or look at a woman with lust in your eyes, and therefore you've committed adultery with her in your heart. I've always kind of come back to that scripture because it's like, that's to me, when I read that, it's like, there's nothing you can do as a guy. You're fucked. You're screwed. You're always going to look at it hot. You're going to go, well, you know what? I kind of want to tap that ass.
We talk about that.
Yeah. Now you're done.
We talk about that whole chapter in Matthew is kind of aimed at Jesus is showing that the law is unattainable.
Yeah.
And that you need him. And so that's part of it. The other part of it is he specifically says adultery there and not fornication. And so if you look at the technical definition of adultery, that would be lusting after a married woman.
Yeah, it's a man lusting after or having sex with a married woman. That's technically the
term. And I hate to get legalistic about this, but is the term fornication anywhere in the Bible?
Yeah, it's
sexual immorality, and that's like the blanket covering for fornication, having sex outside of wedlock. And then
the Greek is fornication. It gets transferred into sexual immorality. Because yeah, I was digging into this too. If it was like, are they translating adultery into fornication? They are not. In the New Testament, like Paul uses specifically the term fornication.
Now, isn't the word like the word Greek word like porno or parno or like pornino, something like that? I think like yeah. I don't have my Greek to English back right now, but I wanted to actually, that's a good point because I want to touch on that, the marriage aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So Rollo, I agree with you. The way that we do marriage now, I can't promote. I can't even say it's biblical. Okay. Because the way that you cannot address marriage without addressing the way that we do divorce. Mm-hmm. And if divorce is specified very clearly in the Bible a certain way, then the church allowing people to get divorces without any correction, the way that they are, with no fault divorce, I can't get behind it. I cannot get behind a system that allows no accountability. And if the church is about accountability, then the way that the church is promoting marriage without accountability is incorrect. And I can't get behind it. So how are people, because, you know, it says like marriage and divorce, where was this at? Okay, divorce is a sin and should never be committed. But like the red pill talks about, you know, if your woman ain't treating you right, or you're not seeing any, if she's not giving you sex, or if you're not happy, you can just leave. I don't think the red pill ever says that.
No, not necessarily. I mean, it's I refer to it as the sort of paradox of commitment, right? What's your main commitment to? Is it to your wife and to the institution of marriage? Is your main commitment to your kids and your family, or is your main commitment to yourself? Like, do you have a commitment to sort of like watch out and protect your own self, right? And I think it is I think one of the worst aspects of gynocentrism is that like guys are committophobes. You're commitment phobic. You want like that, like they're going to use that as some sort of like shaming tactic. And if you think about it, men commit more than women. They just don't commit in terms of marriage, right? Men commit to military service. Men commit to their families. Men commit to jobs. Men commit to education. Men commit to all kinds of other things. But when you say commitment, women always think it refers to them. They always think that it's about marriage. They always think they don't look at anything outside. Commitment is a very broad term. So at what point does your commitment to your wife, at what point is it superseded by your commitment to yourself? Okay. Like, oh, my needs aren't getting met. So therefore, like I'm in a sexless marriage for like 10, 12, 20 years, right? At what point do you go, you know what? This is going nowhere. She's really like this. The juice ain't worth the squeeze and the medium is the message. And I am married to her. She's not cheating on me, but she's not putting out either. So therefore, I'm in just basically this roommate situation with this person who happens to have tits and a vagina, right? And so at what point is your commitment to yourself, does that supersede your commitment to your marriage and your wife? And a lot of people will say it doesn't matter. She can even go cheat and you'll still be committed to it because that's your level of duty and honor and whatever, respectability, I guess, integrity, right?
I'm glad you brought that up. Can I this is where they're probably going to piss a lot of people off.
Paradox of commitment, yeah.
And I'm probably going to, I don't know, you guys hear me out. I think from what I've read, because I've reread First Corinthians 7, and it talks about why men and women should get married, right? To keep to avoid sexual immorality, right? So that each husband have his own wife, each woman have her own husband, and to give, that's their thing. And like the wife's body is not hers, it's the husband's, and the husband's body is not his, it's the wife's. And it says in the Bible not to withhold it from each other unless for an agreed amount of time to commit to fasting and prayer.
Or if you're sick.
Did say sick in there.
If you're puking, don't do it.
But technically it doesn't say that. So what they're saying is anything outside of the confines of marriage, sex without the confines of marriage is sexually immoral. So we see sexual immorality in two forms here: sex outside of marriage and inside of marriage. So sex outside of marriage, immoral. Okay. Sex inside of marriage, that's with not your spouse, immoral. Withholding sex from your spouse and not making yourself available to him, immoral. So Jesus says you're allowed to divorce your wife for sexual immorality. I think there's a strong argument if you're in a sexless marriage and your wife is not fulfilling those needs, there's an argument for sexual immorality. And I'm not the only scholar that looked at this. There's like 4 or 5 other people that I've come across biblically, like biblical theologians that hold that argument.
Maybe the guys can like chime in on this, but
what do you guys think? That's what I want to know. What do you guys think on that? Like, is that?
I think the argument is immaterial right now. I don't think it matters because women, but in the way we do marriage right now, women hold all the keys. So you can't say, well, Your Honor, sexual immorality. She's not. I'm used to getting laid twice a week, and now she's not holding up her end.
Well, yeah, from the governmental standpoint,
not gonna happen.
I mean, I think it's like John did. He did a covenantal marriage, right? Before. And I think that, if you're doing a marriage, like ultimately what is marriage? I think you got to ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of view it as this government thing. And it's like, well, if you really just view it as a commitment between 2 people and God, do you need the government involved in that? I think that's more of a convenience thing for assets and children. Like,
there's a lot of Islamic marriages that do that. They don't involve the government at all. And they've got 4 wives because the government won't allow them to have 4 wives.
Yeah. So I think, that's part of it. Like in today's society, like biblically, I don't think you need to go to government to get married. Like you can make that lifelong commitment without having the government involved, if that is like going to be your hang up to not get married. Because obviously the governmental system right now is not, it incentivizes divorce basically. And I don't think that'll change anytime soon because the entire industry, the lawyer industry on that just makes a killing. Like they're going to make sure that doesn't
watch
stop.
Divorce Incorporated. It's a great documentary from like 2014, 2013. It will show you how the marriage, it goes from like prior to like how people get together, then the marriage and how much it costs to get married, the money involved in credit and student loans and stuff like that. And then it goes through the marriage process, and then it goes through the divorce process and how long it goes through that, what you can expect when you're getting divorced. There are people who are married for like 3 years. It takes them 8 years to get divorced. Right? All right. That because it's a racket. It's a grift. And that's one aspect of it. When I lock horns, I mean, let's just say figuratively speaking, with like a Hafiz or a Ruslan or something like that, it's always, well, okay, I know the risks. I know that she's like, people always say, oh, you're worried about taking half your stuff. Don't worry about that. And it's like, well, you're betting you're betting your future on God told you to do this, right? God told me, well, you know what? I know God told me to jump off that cliff, but it's a leap of faith and I'm going to go do it, right? So to not get married is to sort of to go against their convictions, right? So that's, in fact, I think that's primarily why like these guys who make it their grift to be sort of like the traditional conservative, like, bastions of white knight hope and, for God kind of thing. That's where I think they kind of lose the narrative because they don't see the reality. Like I'm talking about actual realities. Just because I'm saying that, they think that I'm dissuading guys from getting married. They're still going to get married anyways, no matter what I say. All I'm doing is saying go in with both eyes open. I have been married. Have been married in July. I'll be married for 27 years. I have exactly what these guys have always wanted. I have a better marriage than Hafiz. I will say that right now. He's been married for 1 year. I can say that with supreme confidence. And yet I'm the devil. I'm the one who makes his palms itchy, right? Because here I am I'm not saying don't get married. I'm just saying understand the risks, understand what you're getting yourself into. I think everybody ought to get married. I think it's great. I think it's a fantastic, as an institution, I am for marriage. The way we do it now, I am very much against marriage because of the way that the institution of it has become corrupted over the course of the last 60 some odd years. And it is now a racket. And it's not just, and it's a one side, all downside risk for guys right now. And here's a guy who's been happily married. I get sex. I got laid last night. Thank you very much. I go out to Access Vegas and I'm mingling with very beautiful women. My wife takes care of me every time I go and every time I come back. Right. And I've been doing this for quite some time now. I've got a beautiful daughter, graduated with honors and, has a master's degree from a major university, is getting married now. I have everything you guys say that dudes should have and should strive for, but yet I'm the asshole. And I'm the one who's like telling guys not to get married, and you're worried about Rollo Tomasi here. I have a better marriage than you guys do. I have a better lifestyle than you guys do. I believe in the same freaking God that you guys do, right? But because I am giving factual truths about the state of marriage right now, and that I cannot endorse it for the average guy, even my soon to be, son-in-law. It's like, you got to know what you're getting into. And I love him like a son. I love my daughter very, very much. And I want to see them succeed. And I would like to have grandchildren and everything else. I think marriage is the foundation and the bedrock of Western society. But I cannot endorse it the way we do it now. Can we please move past this fucking...
And I think here's the thing. I say the church is part of the corporate in that. Okay, because they're not teaching just that passage in 1 Corinthians. They're not teaching women that withholding sex from your husband is a sin. And you are failing the covenant that you made. A marriage covenant is between you, God, and your spouse. So that's a covenant between you and God before it's between you and your spouse. Who do you think has the more severity of punishment you're going to have? Is it going to be your spouse or is it going to be God? Okay. So in this conflict, but pastors are not teaching that to wives. Pastors are not, they're doing, well, if your wife don't want to put out, it's probably because God's blessing her. She doesn't have to. You're doing something wrong. You're not being a good enough servant and leader. Mm-hmm. And this is where I think the church is lost in this aspect, is where they are so much pro women to where that they're not even practicing biblical principles to uphold marriage the way that it should be. How else would society or culture know how to hold marriage? If the Christians suck at it and we suck at it, then we all just suck at it. Marriage is going to be shit, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of guys just look like shit, and there's not like, there's one thing, like Rollo, you're giving yourself as an example right now. How old are you? You're up. You mean
just turned 55, April 2nd.
You look amazing for being. Excuse my language. You look great for being 55.
Okay, you can say it.
You play in a rock band. You're writing books. You're going out. You're doing things. I mean, you talk about this anxiety within your book, The Rational Male.
Thanks, Joe. All my haters are grinding their teeth right now.
Well, go ahead and grind away, fellas.
Gnashing of teeth.
Because the reality is that if you're not attractive to other women, your wife's probably not going to want to bang you. And you're probably not going to enjoy that sex either way. Like, even if she is just putting out for you, enjoy that sex, bro, because it's going to suck. All right. And it's not going to be good sex. It's going to be crap.
It's not
going to be probably better off cracking the turnip in the bathroom by yourself.
Snapping the radish.
So the way that I see it is like, yes, put the guy, get hot, bro. Be attractive.
Put some effort in.
Put some effort in. And if you do have a 300-pound whale at home, I am sorry for you. Okay. And that was a long journey it took to get to that whale status. Just the same way it's going to be a long journey to cut down that 300 pounds to something that's more healthy. And so you're not critically obese.
Be the guy that other men want to be and other women want to have sex with.
And it's going to be there you go. So like, even if you are married, pick up The Rational Male and read that book, because it's going to be very beneficial.
Right. I mean, I don't see why people think that, that there's some sort of incompatibility between the red pill. I mean, I love it when people tell me, you know what, the Bible is really the first red pill. I'm like, yeah, it is. You just lost your way. You're right. Islam is actually the red. Yeah, you're right. But the elements that you're talking about, long time ago. And I'd say, thanks for the props there. And I also want to give some props to Mike there too. It's like at 29 and you look good and everything else, and you're red pill enough and you understand you going in with both eyes open and everything. At least you will be able to sort of, I think you'll be able to vet much better. And I think the biggest challenge for a guy like you, Mike, is going to be like women who are going to like want you to expect to get with them because you're the good guy, right? Oh, he's going to marry me. I'm a single mommy because he's a good guy.
I've seen it endlessly already.
Yeah.
I'm
sure you do well with chicks, but like which chicks,
Hey, tell him about the story you told me the other day, Mike. Tell him about
the fly swatter out. He's like, get away. Stop.
But it comes down to like what I call the epiphany phase, for example. which is like they're 29 to 31 years old. And now they're not looking for the bad boy in the 18 to 28 range. They're not looking for, Tinder swindler. They're not looking for the dude that's the party boy. They're looking for a guy who's nice, stable, has his shit together, has a good podcast. He's a godly man, mighty man of God, and got biceps. What do you got? Like 20-inch biceps right there. Like guys that are just going to get the job done. And they think they're entitled to you. You know what I mean? And like, you're just like, you better go and do what the Lord says, because here I am, and you're going to have to forgive me of my past. Because
I call that, I've seen Mike in action. I call it the Mulvaney, it's the
Mulvaney tomahawk.
He pulls the tomahawk out and just chop. So he's chopping all the time. Mike is an incessant chopper.
I get accused of being my standards are too high on girls' pasts and stuff like that. So,
oh yeah, when it comes down to like body count or, wanting to know a girl's history, well, I'm sanctified. I have Jesus. None of that stuff matters. We can't even have that conversation. It's almost like you're on the used car lot and they won't tell you how many miles are on the car. It's like, it's just good. All right.
I'm really good at vetting or understanding a girl's.
Look, the tires are nice.
Ask about the past.
I'll tell you a funny joke. Like, you're not allowed to like turn the odometer back on a car, but like you can go get like hymen replacement surgery. Or it's like, I'm a born again virgin again. I'm
sanctified now.
Did you guys hear about this story? There's this doctor in California, right? So he marries this super hot babe, right? And then he bangs her and he has kids, and his kids, they come out butch, like ugly kids. And he's like, what the hell is going on? And then he asks her, he looks at her, which is kind of, she's had a bunch of surgeries done. Like, he sees it and he sues her for, I forget what it was, but he actually gets through with it. And it's because she basically didn't marry the person that that she said she was.
So that much plastic surgery, huh?
Bro, look at Kylie Jenner, bro.
Crazy.
She was a kid that she was not that good looking, bro. I mean, it's just the way it is. Natural beauties are far and few between to find them anymore.
Yeah. We are at the 2:35 mark. Is there anything else you wanted to get to before we get out of here?
Yeah, let me just kind of like bow this up real quick here. So we covered like the fact that, there's innate nature. The innate nature that Rollo studies in the red pill and evo psych is about what our innate sinful nature basically, if you want to look at it from a biblical worldview, our innate sinful nature is what evo psych studies, right? Is that as simple as form to say? Okay, for those that have a Christian worldview, doesn't mean you have to act on all your innate natures. That's where your biblical worldview comes from. How you apply the red pill lens in this sense is knowing what the innate natures are and how our men and women interact with each other, or what they are innately driven to respond to each other. That way you could see through the red pill lens and act accordingly through your biblical principles. That's how I look at it. It's like you have the principles and then you have the glasses on and you're reading the Bible with red pill glasses, and you can navigate that way.
Well, I think there's more to, all religion in general, but I think there's more to Christianity than just like a set of prescribed behaviors. Okay, there's much more to it than that. And I think we get really kind of out of our element if all we figure is like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, and this is my sinful nature, and I'm supposed to act this way so I can avoid that sinful nature. Anything that's sinful nature, it finds its roots in evolutionary adaptations, right? Do it too much and you're screwed, right? You want to know why there's prohibitions against guys jerking off? Well, because you do it too much and you lose your drive to actually go out and do shit that would help you become more attractive to the opposite sex. That's why we got guys who are addicted to pornography, and we make it too easy, right? Why are guys fat? Well, because we don't have to hunt our food anymore. We have to kill the antelope to eat the antelope now. So, I mean, and by order of degrees, I'm being, that's another extreme, but like, I think that if you look at religion as a set of best practices, then what you're looking at is you're saying, okay, here's the reality. Here's what the machine is about. Well, the machine is going to steer this way, or it's going to do this. And if I really want to keep the machine in top working order, for the longest time possible, then I have to sort of like go against some of the innate nature of that machine just to get along with other machines and to get to live my best life, right? So it's if you look at religion in general as a set of best practices, then you've got it's all based on conditionality at that time. It's like what works best. And like, for instance, I've said this before, I don't give prescriptions, but I know people who do. Like the white pill, the traditional conservatism, the black pill, MGTOW. Those aren't the red pill. Those are sets of behavior. Those are best practices. Hey, this is okay. We have this information that is the red pill. Here's what we ought to do. Okay. Christianity's had a lock on that for a lot longer than MGTOW or black pill. I'll tell you that right now. Okay. So if you're going to look at religion from a set of like the medium is the message kind of thing, if you look at it as a set of prescribed behaviors, well, then I understand the function of those behaviors, and I understand what they're meant to curb, or to emphasize, maybe even, compassion and that kind of stuff, or altruism for that matter is pro-social. Why not? So we have metaphorical truths that reinforce pro-social behaviors and mindsets and everything else. Great. Awesome. But I think that religion is much more than that. I think there's also the sort of the supernatural metaphysical side of it as well.
Thank you.
And that, I think, gets lost when we're trying to say Rollo doesn't like marriage. Like, I'm talking about like, I'm talking about the creator of the universe here. Mm-hmm. You're like down in there, but what about marriage?
It's like it's the problem with the gestalt versus all the little tiny pieces. And everyone gets consumed in little pieces and splitting hairs, and they forget that you're worshiping an all-powerful God. And
right.
You need to do the work, what it takes to have compassion. Like these words like love, they're gigantic words. They encompass so much, and the defining of them takes generations,
well,
and you're going to have to put the time and the effort into them. But the idea that, I'm not going to eat pork, or like they all have a reason, like you say, and it's good to research these things to find out, okay, there's a reason for this. It's all
we're looking at behaviorism as opposed as in divine metaphysical senses, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, fine. But, and somebody accused me of being an atheist like earlier in the chat. I'm sorry, I didn't start it, but it's like, no, I'm not. I have a faith. And if you'd read my book, the very last chapter of my 4th book, I can sit here for the next 3 hours and explain it to you, how I come to that conclusion. But it's much easier if you just go read the last chapter, right?
Well, I think as far as religion, like I hate the term religion. Like in my view, like religion's just it's man-made. I think it's what Jesus came to combat. Like you just see him fighting against the Pharisees over and over again, because they made they turned Judaism into like this mess of a religion. Like you look at the Mishnah, like has like 8,000 pages of rules and stuff. And
made it legalistic.
So that's what, like when you're talking about these behaviors and stuff, I kind of view that as, it's like the legalism term, like legalistic. And then
it's
like I view it as even though I want to follow these quote behaviors, it's not out of like I'm checking these boxes because it's like a religious thing. It's like I believe this is true. I have a relationship with Jesus, and I think he's got kind of what's best for us in mind. And so I'm going out of honor for him and out of realization of that.
Yeah.
Like, I want to live that way.
Well, I pointed this out again, and I think it was in either the end or the introduction of book 4, is that there is and I don't know what it is, but there is a module or an area of our brain that predisposes human beings to magical thinking. And I use the illustration. I think it was Albert Einstein who asked this question, what's more important, imagination or knowledge? And everybody, imagination is much fun. Like that's the proper answer is like, no, actually the proper answer is both.
Both. Why do they have to be diametrically opposed?
Because imagination is supposed to be like, ooh, let's all get flowery and eye in the sky kind of thing. It's like, no, knowledge is very important. What they're asking is what's more important, emotion or reason? Because imagination has to have some sort of root, and you have to have some knowledge to be imaginative in the first place, and you have to have imagination to actually increase your knowledge. So they both work in tandem. Right. So to say one is more important than the other, I think is false. But the reason why we get to that, or reason why that's even a question, is because we're wondering what is possible and what could be, right? So when we talk about the physical and the metaphysical, Metaphysical is basic. I mean, in its simplest form, it's just beyond the physical, what we don't know, like what's out there. Like, are there ghosts? Are there aliens? Or there, is there something that is out there? There's some form of energy that maybe we sight, sound, touch, taste, whatever, all our five senses. Is there something form of energy that's out there that we don't have an organ to be sensitive to? Right? Maybe there's like, we didn't even know what ultraviolet or ultra green light was up until the 20th century. We never saw it anyways. We could, theoretically we could figure it was there, but we never saw it through like night vision goggles or anything. Now it's just like, we see that on the next action film, right? Where do you take it for granted? Right. But those are things that we didn't know. They were invisible to us, and now they're visible to us. They were metaphysical and they became physical. So they might have always been physical, but we didn't know that they existed. And so therefore they were metaphysical, that they're beyond the physical until we bring them into and prove them physically. Right. So one of the principles I talked about in the fourth book was this, is that once we take something that is metaphysical and we turn it physical, or we explain an article of faith in physical terms, it ceases to become faith. Because now we have it right here. So when I say, like, for instance, when I'm saying like, God said, don't eat hoofed animals, don't eat shellfish, don't eat bacon, right? Because the function is, of course, you'll die if you do that. Now, back then you get trichinosis, like I said, but now you can eat cured pork. And now it's kosher, right? Hebrew National, have this hot dog, right? It's good to eat now. And so we kind of change things on the fly, but it's no longer, what we've done is we've taken the metaphysical rule of not eating pork and we go, okay, now I get it. If we cure pork, we can eat it and not die. Well, God says it's okay if the rabbi, says 10 shalom aleikoms over it, and now we can like eat, pork again. So now, because what we've done is we've taken a metaphysical principle and we brought it into the physical world. And so now it's no longer an article of faith. You're not going to die if you eat pork, obviously, for Easter, for crying out loud.
Well, that applies to things like love and grace. And I think words that
that's where I was going with
more, because those are words that have giant definitions. When you sit there and you say love, you mean a ton of different things by that. People even go as far as to say God is love, and that is just way out of bounds there. He's all powerful.
Love is God. Everybody's made like their God.
Said Rollo, and this is important for guys to understand. It's like, it's great to define things. It's great to a word defines something, but once you define something like that with a word, it also dies at the same time. What I mean by dies is it loses its, what we're saying, using the word metaphysical, but it loses its ability to show you something new. It's the same reason why you remember the houses when you were, 7 years old on your road. But now you don't remember the houses on your new road. They're all just houses. These are just faces that you see every single day. These are just interactions that your brain tells you, you've already seen this 1,000 times. This is what it is. You lose a novelty. You lose that experience because you're just right.
There's no more frontiers.
Right. Yeah. So you need to have that in religion. And that's the reason why we don't like the word religion, is because it stifles that. It kills it. It allows it. God is no longer a living God that we worship. He's a dead God.
I think it is becoming more and more difficult to
prophecy becomes a sentence and does not become something that we have a part to play in. It's like when they read the book of Revelation, it's like, oh, these things are going to happen. They may happen if we continue going on this direction, right? Prophecy was always a warning in the Old Testament, saying if this is going to happen, if we continue going down this road and you guys continue acting this way, this is the outcome. But what are you going to do? How are you going to do this? So that's what happens when we kill and we allow we allow prophecy to be a sentence, or we start to put these words and define the God, the all-powerful, the metaphysical, with these words. It's fun to do, and it helps order things and structure things, and we absolutely need it, but you cannot let it eclipse the power and the living nature of God, which you will never be able to define. That's why it's faith-driven.
I'm just going to end it with this. Is I think that I think what you're saying is right, and especially the fact that we don't have, like, I think one of the main reasons why we have the Lost Boys generation, and we're all like, clutching our pearls over incels, and that's not a joke about Pearl. Thank you very much. It's the fact that we don't have the imagination that with a sense of wonder the frontiers that we used to have before, because it goes back to my daughter once said, like, she was watching that movie The Conjuring, right, the horror scary movie, not a horror movie, but a scary movie, and she looked at me after this, she goes, "This is a really scary movie." I go, "Yeah." And she's like, "You know why it's scary?" I go, "Why?" She goes, "Because it's in the 70s." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have the kind of communication, you had the phone was on the wall kind of thing." And so, yeah, I mean, you're way more isolated from that kind of stuff. But really what it is your imagination, imagining something that's fearful. You don't have to imagine that anymore, because you can just take a picture of it and go, "Hey, look, there's an alien here. Great, let's put it on Instagram." Like the whole sense of wonderment and the magical thinking. I think one of the things that's happened recently is we have a lack of imagination, because
100%.
magical thinking doesn't have to be bad. It can be responsible for some of the worst human atrocities in history, but it's also a necessary part for us to watch the next Marvel movie, right? Or to have to enjoy something that is imaginative and fun and a flight of fantasy. Creativity relies on imagination. And I think one of the reasons why we're so stagnant and we're in this really kind of depressive mode right now, and it seems like everybody's down on everything, is because we know we can, there's no sense of wonderment. There's no more frontiers. There's no more, like, where do we go? What do we explore? Nothing. You want to know why guys?
I want to just say one thing about one more thing, Rollo, to add into there, is you cannot love people if you see them as items. And that's what happens. You lose that ability to see the beauty within each individual. You're not going to love them. You're not going to understand them. And good luck talking about Jesus, because it's just going to go right down the toilet. They know inherently that you don't care about them. You don't see them. You don't see them.
Yep.
Yeah. I want to.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to add this real quick. You know, it's like one thing about your 99 rules that I love the most is rule number 6. You know, when you talk about the difference of love.
Not number 3.
Oh, I love them all. But, you know, but number 6, biblically speaking wise, because it goes back to Ephesians, and it talks about how men are to love their wives and wives are to love or respect their husbands. And you mentioned how men and women view love differently and idealistically. And that right there, and just the way that Ephesians writes about it, it's a different concept, you know, and that to me is where it clicked for me and made me dive deeper into the Bible more than before. Like, you know, because I was like, wow, there's more things here than just theory here, you know. So I wanted to say this, the guys that are watching, appreciate you guys watching. I encourage you to do your own work. Like, do your own work. Don't listen to the guy on the pulpit. Open the book up yourself and read and read it for yourself. Okay. Take the time to, if you believe in this, invest in it. Invest your time to figure out why you believe in it. If you believe in the red pill stuff, you think it's true, then invest your time in reading the work. You know, I'm going
get on a Byron and just look at the clips. Read the freaking book. Like my
I'm going through book 4 again right now, and I'm breaking it down so I could see other biblical principles, see where I could find other things that cross over and behold tenet of truth. But you have to do the work. If you're not doing the work and you're just taking somebody's word for it, then you're an idiot.
You got to build things up on your own. You've got to build the life that you want to see. You could use good tools to do that, but the only way you're going to do that is if you actually put in the time to read with stuff, go to the gym. Money, muscles, and game. You got to spend time in the gym. You got to spend time working on your business. You got to spend time reading my work, the Bible, whatever it is that wherever you're benefiting from, whatever is helping you build the life that you want. There's no instant fix. This isn't the world isn't TikTok. The world isn't, like instant it's not like instant gratification. It's not like TLDR. You have to actually do the DR, like read, please read the freaking thing. And then you'll be better educated as a result of that. So
that's right.
Guys, where can people find you, Iron Disciples? I'm going to put your link will end up in the description, just so you know. But what do you guys do? Like, when do you guys, what's your schedule anyways?
We usually put out one podcast a week. We don't do it live yet. We'll be doing that coming up probably next month. But as far as finding us, at Iron Disciples Podcast, pretty much on all platforms.
And I know you're on Instagram. I discovered you were on Twitter.
I just started my own personal Twitter account.
Okay.
It's entertaining there. I couldn't stay away.
And ladies, he's single and he's a virgin and he's a Christian. And he's 29 and you better come correct. So
TikTok and
correct.
YouTube.
We'll give you the.
I'll find out if you're not correct.
The tomahawk.
And then tell us about it.
Exactly. All right, Glenn, tell us where they can find you too.
You can find me on my channel, Glenn Lawrence presents. I find me on Instagram, Glenn Lawrence presents. You can find me on the Dragon Ship on Saturdays, and periodically I somehow get on Rule Zero on Saturdays.
Amazingly enough, we'll get you back on Rule Zero. You're in the group, so whatever you want. And then you're also occasionally we'll bring you on Access Vegas, probably once or twice, I'm sure.
Well, the funny thing is, I talked to the guys at Sticky Paws the other day, and since I'm finishing up my cinematography degree, I might be going down there to do some interning.
We're expanding, man. We're opening up to like the other side of that building. So there's going to be at least 2 more studios pretty soon, which means there's going to be need for people with tech skills. So yeah. So I might be out there pretty soon. So we'll see. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
so
you
let me.
much, Rollo.
For sure. Let me just finish up. Thank you guys for helping us out with this. This has been a really great. I would like to do this again at some time. I think this is a really productive talk.
Should discuss like the servant leader? I would love to dive into that.
Totally ready to do that.
Okay, that would be awesome.
Next time we get together, we'll do that. We'll do this again. But that said, I will be on tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. I got that coming up. And let's see, I'll be back in Las Vegas on Wednesday, Sin City. Me and the Lord have an understanding. So I'll be there. What am I working on when I'm out there? I think I'm doing Sticky Paw stuff while I'm out there. I also have to go to the DMVs to get my Camaro registered finally. And then the following week, you guys are going to love this one. We got Gary, the numbers guy. I'm going to do a debate with him
on Twitter.
And so is I'm actually more like moderating it. It's actually Mike Sartain versus Gary Ginsberg, Gary the numbers guy, numerology, astrology guy. So if you enjoyed this show, you'll probably love that one.
Hey, this one's titled "Heated Debate." We didn't get into the heated part.
I know that was great.
Trust me, you gotta throw out a little bait. You gotta throw some chum in the water to get some people.
Well, you know what? I'm pretty sure like Ruslan is gonna respond to it, so that would be
I hope so. I'll have him on if he wants to come on. And you have all of us on here for this, I'll be happy to do that.
I know he's in San Diego. He's not that far from me.
I was gonna say he's in San Diego. Anyways, so that's what I got going on. I will see you guys tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, regular time. And I will get into it about the FBI designating red pill as enemies of the state, and I'm going to get into this new study that's going on by what's this dude's name? I can't remember his name. Forget it. Anyways, I'm going to be doing some video breakdowns of these guys who are doing studies on incels and should women run the world. That's also on the docket for tomorrow as well. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you. I'm going to play us out with the outro here, and you guys can take off or you can hang around. It's up to you, but I am going to play this right now.
I need to feel you on top of me. It was my first time, but I was just a kid when we met and went to bed. It was my first time. What do you expect from me? I'm breaking up the rules now in the game. I've got some new tools. Please do the same. Time came by and went over like a matchbox stereo. Time to get my thoughts now, let it go. Bound to keep me up all night. But maybe we can fuck again, and maybe things be different. Goddamn, baby, one more again. Won't you put it on me one more again? I need to know if maybe we can fuck again. Maybe things be different. Goddamn, baby, one more again. Best in my life. bedroom, whole time stopping and sleeping with her head like she's calling you Kelly. So baby, ride me up and down like a pony, turning up my song, getting messy, working up and down on your body. Ride me up and down like a pony, turning up my song on your body. Baby, we get down to it all night, but maybe we can fuck again, and maybe things be different. Thank you very much. And I've been for a while. If maybe we can fuck again, then maybe things be different. Maybe one more kiss.
Preceding podcast has been a production of the Rational Male. All rights reserved, registered trademark 2023. Don't commit adultery. Don't covet thy neighbor's copyright. Don't steal my stuff.
Well, I'm a whore.
Would you like to know more?
If maybe we can fuck again, and maybe things be different. Maybe one more kiss. Won't you put it on me one more kiss? If maybe we can fuck again, then maybe things be different. Goddamn, baby, one more kiss. Best day of my life. If maybe we can fuck again, then maybe things be different. The best day of my life.
That's nasty. It is nasty, right? Isn't it nasty? Ugh.